Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. Why is Grandma at the gate? I live in a fairly safe neighborhood in a not-so-safe country, if you know what I mean. I reside in a street that's lined with houses that are blocked around / private, and everyone more or less knows everyone in there, but of course we're always vigilant because you can never tell when you might be unlucky. I live about a quarter mile in, my house right after a bridge next to a deep river that you can't really cross, and on the other side miles of tall grass. I live with 7 other people in the household. Every night, we ensure we lock the main front gate and activate the security cameras. We also have staircases leading to the front and back entrances of the second floor that's burglar-proof and secured by even more gates. The remaining perimeter of the property is blocked off with high concrete walls adjoining the roof, leaving no space for any sizable creature to crawl through. This particular night, the entire family was out. They had gone to a wake of a close family friend. I was home alone because I'm 26 and needed an early night's rest for work the following day. It was just after 8 p.m. I locked up and went to shower. I usually play music while doing so, but a few minutes into my routine, I could have sworn I heard a faint knock coming from my front door. At this, I quickly jumped out, turned off the music, and stood in silence. Feelings of confusion and panic were creeping in, because I was 100% sure everything was locked. The gates, the doors, plus I had the keys inside the house. A few drawn-out moments passed when I heard it again, but this time it came from my bedroom window that's on the second floor with no ledge to stand on the opposite side of the house. I checked the cameras and saw that there was no one at any of the windows or entrances, and it showed no one entered any time into property. My logical mind brushed it off as maybe a huge bug or something, but I wasn't convinced. I got dressed, and as soon as I walked back into the living room, I heard the padlock on the main front gate being tampered with. This padlock is inside, and you basically have to shove your hand in an awkward position through narrow metal bars to even reach it. I hurriedly checked through a window that gave direct sight to the main gate, and what I saw made my knees buckle. Standing outside my gate, in the darkness of the night, faintly aglow by the dimming street light, was my grandmother. She was in one of her homemade dresses she had sewn, and her head was covered with a white translucent shawl that obscured part of her face. Now you're probably thinking, do go open the gate for your grandma. Well, only one problem with that. She's been dead for 14 years and was cremated. I blinked a million times trying to blame exhaustion from work for what I was seeing, but somehow whatever that stood there taking the form of my poor grandmother had caught sight of me looking through the window. It slowly raised its hand and waved awkwardly and beckoned me to come open the gate without saying a word. Immediately, I called my mom and explained what was going on. Thankfully, she didn't doubt me because she had also experienced strange things along with my other relatives in this street. I looked out after making the call and saw that the figure was gone. Within 20 minutes, my mom and other relatives arrived home. They did a thorough search and found no one on the property. What's even weirder was that the security camera footage showed no one was standing at the gate during the time I was experiencing this. My older cousin decided to do one last check around the house outside this time, and in some tall overgrown bushes a few feet from the property, he found a white shawl, except this one had many holes and was tinged with dirt as if it had been buried under the earth for years. This happened a month ago, and since then I've never stayed home at night alone. Story 2. Hey, does anyone know the show with the man in the suit? I know this title seems dumb and weird, but I need help because I saw it last night. I was minding my own business, cooking when a movie I was watching finished. It auto-played to a man standing in a room with a light beaming down with his back facing toward the camera. He was like that for a minute or longer. He then adjusted himself and turned around to face the camera. He was wearing a nice suit and tie with shaggy hair. You just couldn't see his face. No, it wasn't like he was missing his face. You could see his lips. It was the lighting of the room. It was like a spotlight for a stage. He then began to speak. I couldn't remember most of it, for it just sounded like rambling. He would start on one subject and then immediately jump to the next. It was kind of disorienting. I was going to shut it off when he started another ramble. I remember seeing her for the first time. She was so perfect. I thought right then and there she would be my home. Someone I couldn't live without. A smile of delight grew on his face. The first few interactions were bumping into each other. We had been working at the same place. She was just starting and I had been there for a while. Her smile was like magic. I would intentionally find ways for me to bump into her. She was my little way into heaven. He was rubbing his ring finger. It took a while to convince her to go on a date with me. She was worried about how it would affect work, how they would look at us, normal little things. When we did go, I took her to this lavish place downtown. It was beautiful and perfect. I knew she would love it. She did. She was absolutely smitten. I could see it on her face and how she did her little excited dance. We ordered some basic fancy food like steak and lobster. The shit, that makes a dent in the pocket. I would do it all for her though. When we got done at the restaurant, I took her stargazing. I had found this perfect place not too far from the city. It was a place perfect for a first kiss. He stumbled with his words for a second. She was so pretty. I was staring at her more than the stars. I think she knew, but didn't care. She looked at me at one point, and all I could stare at were her lips. They called me. Now, maybe I was a little all over and wine drunk, but I went for it. Something sober me wouldn't have done. The more I think back on it, I lucked out. She kissed me back, and from there it was history. The excitement growing in his voice was like a little kid getting a toy. We would go on more dates, get more daring at the workplace. Finally, we decided to go home and have sex. It felt like heaven. I had never felt anything better. The euphoria on his face was growing exponential at this point. It wasn't long, though. I had forgotten one thing, one simple thing, that my wife had worked today and was only dropping the kids off for school. You could see the red in her eyes before she swung the axe. It hit me first and went straight through the back of my skull. I didn't feel the pain. I was dead on the spot. The lady, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. They say they're still finding pieces of her all over the neighborhood. He chuckled on that remark. My wife turned herself in only after drowning our son, saying that was her only crime. They found me a couple days afterwards. Head off and penis cut off. I think that being her last fuck you to me. He paused for a moment before dropping the smile. September 4th, 2025, 8 a.m., he said before the TV, cutting back to some old film. I was confused to say the least. It only got worse when I woke up the next morning to the work group chat saying the boss had been killed, that his wife went crazy or something. Not all the details are known, except there are 2 more victims, one being their child and the other being unknown. I just need to know if I was the only one to see it. Story 3. I worked the night shift in the desert, but this isn't me writing anymore. You ever wonder what kind of job makes a man come apart at the seams? Fractured not over weeks or years, but in one single black lunge night? Not from stress, not from boredom, but from something else. Something dry and crawling that licks at the edge of your sanity like wind-blown sand against old bone. Yeah, I used to wonder that too. Now, I don't wonder much of anything. My thoughts come slow, like they gotta drag themselves up through molasses. I don't sleep, not really. When I do, I hear the whispering. I see flickers in corners that should be empty. I don't trust my reflection anymore. I don't trust my own voice. Something came back with me from that place. Something I never invited. The job was simple, or so I thought. One night shift in the middle of nowhere, and a list of rules. Just 12 of them. Keep your head down. Stay awake. Follow the rules. But rules mean nothing when the air itself wants to gut you. When silence starts to hum. When shadows breathe. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name's Eric. I'm 28 years old, though now I feel older, worn down like desert stone under centuries of wind. I've never been the stay in one place kind of guy. I've chased hurricanes on oil rigs, run toward wildfires when everyone else ran away, and even launched myself off rooftops for a few thousand YouTube subscribers back in the day. I guess you could say danger was my drug. I didn't just flirt with risk. I waltzed with it, arms wide, laughing in its face. So when I saw the job post, a night watch gig at an isolated weather station in the far reaches of West Texas, it felt like a gift. The pay was suspiciously good. The location? Dead center of the XYZ desert. 50 miles off any real road. No towns. No neighbors. No signal. Just a pin on a map and a time to show up. I packed light. Books I wouldn't read. A journal I wouldn't write in. And that stupid optimism only people who haven't been broken yet still carry. The outpost, Station 119B, was a concrete box. One room. No markings, no signs of life. Just a dented steel door and a big black window staring out an endless stretch of sand. Inside, there was a desk cluttered with equipment I couldn't name, a fridge, a cot, and a generator that sounded like it was one bad night away from dying. But what caught my attention wasn't any of that. It was the manual, a thin, grease-stained pamphlet on the desk, labeled in crooked red ink, Rules for Night Shift Operator, Station 119B. Not instructions, not training, rules. There were 12. And they weren't the kind of rules you find in HR handbooks. They read like folklore passed down from some ancient desert cult. 1. Do not open the door between 12:13 a.m. and 1:34 a.m., no matter who is knocking. 2. 3. If you hear tapping on the window, turn off all lights and lie face down until it stops. 4. 5. Log wind speed every 30 minutes. If wind speed hits 0, hide in the supply closet until it rises again. 6. 7. If the generator goes out, light the red emergency candle. Never use a flashlight. 8. 9. Do not acknowledge voices calling your name from outside. 10. 11. If the desert goes silent, no wind, no bugs, recite the phrase tape the fridge. 12. 13. Check the sand just outside the door every hour. If footprints appear going in but not out, call base code, yellow echo. 14. 15. If the phone rings more than once per night, unplug it. 16. 17. Never look at the reflection in the window after 2:44 a.m. 18. 19. Don't fall asleep. 20. 21. Don't eat the food in the fridge after midnight. 22. 23. If Rule 1 is broken, burn the manual immediately and pray. 24. I read them again and again. Each pass made my skin prickle. It was like reading a curse disguised as policy. But instead of walking away, I laughed. Really laughed, sharp, barked out loud like a man who thinks he's above fear. Because I was still the guy who thought ghosts were fun stories and rules were made to be tested. It sounded strange in that room. Too loud, too human. It bounced off the concrete walls like it didn't belong there. Maybe it didn't. In my head, this was all just some elaborate hazing ritual. A creepy prank left behind by some disgruntled ex-employee with a flair for drama. I imagine a guy like me, bored, probably high, scribbling down those rules just to mess with the next poor sucker assigned to Station 119B. The candle, the weird times, the chanting. Classic psychological tripwire stuff. Probably some government joke I wasn't on. Still, the place didn't sit right with me. The air was too dry. Not just desert dry, but hollow, like the atmosphere had been scooped out. The silence felt rehearsed, choreographed. And the stars above the station, they didn't twinkle. They just watched, cold close too sharp, like pinholes poked through a thin sheet of sky. If you stared too long, you got the feeling something might stare back. But I told myself, I've jumped out of planes. I've stood on collapsing fire lines. I put my own damn hand in a box full of scorpions on a dare for likes. What's a little ghost story in the desert? The first couple hours passed like I expected. Dull, dry, and quiet. I logged the wind speed like rule number 3 said, every 30 minutes. I even timed it with my watch to be precise, treating it more like a chore than a warning. I made some instant coffee that tasted like regret. I watched the tarantula the size of my palm crawl across the outside of the window, slow, aimless, like it knew it was being watched. Then, around midnight, things started to bend. Not snap, not break, just bend, subtly, like the world had gone a few degrees off center. It was 12:11 a.m. when I heard the knock, a sound so ordinary it felt impossible for it to feel so wrong. Not banging, not frantic, just 3 knocks, spaced out, intentional, like whoever was outside wasn't asking to be let in. They were stating they were already here. Every hair on my neck stood at attention. My hands clenched around the mug before I realized they were shaking. My mind stumbled back to rule number 1. Do not open the door between 12:13 a.m. and 1:34 a.m. No matter who is knocking. I froze. My thoughts tried to be logical, tried to be brave. Probably just the wind, I whispered to myself, though the words felt hollow even as I said them. But the wind doesn't knock. It howls. It hisses. It dances through cracks and moans through empty places. It doesn't walk up to a reinforced steel door and knock 3 times. Exactly. Then stop. I checked the wall clock. 12:13 a.m. My throat tightened like I'd swallowed dry sand. My legs screamed to move toward the door, away from it. I didn't even know, but I stayed still. Not because I believed the rule. No, not yet. But because something in my gut, something primal and old, told me that opening that door would be a very final kind of mistake. The knocks came again. Same rhythm. 3. Then silence. 12:20. More knocks. 12:29. Again. 12:41. They kept coming every few minutes. Always 3. Always the same weight behind them. As if the thing on the other side had all the time in the world. I didn't respond. I didn't speak. I just sat there, heart hammering, watching the second hand crawl across the clock face like it was moving through tar. Then came the tapping. Not on the door, on the window. A soft, delicate tap, 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 like fingernails on glass. I turned slowly, deliberately, expecting to see something. Anything. A face. A shape. But the window showed only the dark, stretching desert. Pale sand under a black sky. Empty. Still. Then, tap, 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 right against the glass. Closer this time. More urgent. Like whatever was outside had grown impatient. Something deep in me, some instinct older than thought, screamed to obey the manual. I threw the lights off and dropped flat to the floor, face down, just like rule number 2 demanded. And let me tell you, I felt ridiculous, lying on cold concrete, like a scolded child playing hide and seek. My breath echoed in my ears, too loud, too fast. The tapping continued, soft, steady, like it was trying to coax me up. I didn't move. The darkness stretched forever. Finally, mercifully, the tapping stopped. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then, slowly, I pushed myself up, muscles aching from the tension. I flicked the lights back on and blinked into the sterile brightness. Then, like a complete jackass, I laughed at myself. Real mature, I thought, terrified by shadows and knocks like I'm in a Halloween special. But the laughter didn't stick this time. It crumbled in my throat like dry paper, because as I stood there, letting my pulse settle, my eyes drifted toward the wind monitor on the desk, and it was flatlining. 0. No wind, not even a whisper. My stomach dropped. Rule number 3 roared back into my mind like a siren. If wind speed hits 0, hide in the supply closet until it rises again. And suddenly, I wasn't laughing anymore. I checked the wind monitor again, hoping, praying, I'd read it wrong. Wind speed, 0 miles per hour. Nothing, not a breeze, not a whisper. The line on the graph was dead flat, like a heartbeat that had given up. My chest tightened, squeezed and inside, like my lungs were folding in. That couldn't be right. Out here, the wind never stopped completely. Even the still nights carried a faint, restless stir through the sand. But now, the world outside was holding its breath. I should have stayed inside, but something pulled me toward the door. Not curiosity, denial, that desperate human instinct to confirm the lie. To tell yourself everything's fine if you can just see it for yourself. I stepped outside and immediately felt the weight of mistakes settle on me like lead. The air was wrong, not just calm, dead, still in a way that felt manufactured, unnatural. Even my own breathing sounded too loud. There was no wind, no rustle of dry shrubs, no skittering bugs, nothing but the crunch of my boots on sand. The desert had gone mute, and then I saw them, footprints in the sand, just a few feet from the threshold, coming in, but none going out. I stood there for a full, frozen second, my body refusing to catch up to what my brain was screaming. Then instinct kicked in. I spun, bolted for the door, slammed it shut behind me like it might keep something out that had already gotten in. Lock, chain, bolt. I checked everything, hands trembling, breath sharp and uneven. And then my stomach twisted as another rule clawed its way up from memory. Rule number 7. Check the sand just outside the door every hour. If footprints appear going in, but not out, call base. Code, Yellow Echo. The satellite phone was right where it had been, on the desk, a gray relic from another era. I grabbed it like a lifeline, dialed the code with fingers that barely obeyed me. It rang, once, twice, then it connected. And what I heard next nearly stopped my heart. It was my voice, but not like a recording. It was live. It was me, except it wasn't. The cadence was slightly wrong. The tone a hair off. Too calm. Too final. You shouldn't have opened the door, it said. Click. Silence. I stood there, staring at the receiver like it might explain itself. Then I yanked the cord from the back. The phone went dead. That's when the lights cut out. All at once. Like someone had flipped a master switch on reality. Total blackness swallowed the room. The kind of black that has depth. Like it could reach out and touch you back. I didn't breathe. Didn't move. Then my memory jolted into motion. Rule number 4. If the generator goes out, light the red emergency candle. Never use a flashlight. I scrambled to the shelf, nearly knocking over the chair in the dark. My fingers found a candle. A thick, stubby thing already set in a glass holder. I fumbled for the lighter, struck it, and lit the wick with a hand that couldn't stop shaking. A small, flickering flame sprang to life, and the room changed. The dim red light didn't just reveal the space. It warped it. Shadows twisted too far into the corners, stretching longer than they should. The air shimmered, barely perceptible, like heat off asphalt, but colder. The walls felt too close now, as if the room had been inching inward, shrinking around me when I wasn't looking. I turned slowly, and for just a breath, I thought I saw movement in the reflection of the window. Not a shape, not a face, just shifting. The kind of thing your brain registers an instant too late. That's when I heard it. A whisper, soft, barely audible, but unmistakable. Eric. My name. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't angry. It was gentle, almost caring, like the voice of someone who knew me, loved me, wanted me to trust it. But it didn't come from the door, and it didn't come from outside. It came from somewhere, from everywhere, inside the room, behind the walls, in the space under the cot, in the reflection in the window I wasn't supposed to look at. My skin crawled, my mouth went dry, my heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to run for the door by itself. Rule number 5. Do not acknowledge voices calling your name from outside. But was it outside? I didn't know, and that's what terrified me most. I clenched my jaw, shut my eyes, and forced myself not to move, not to speak. The voice came again. Eric, it whispered, closer this time, like it had crossed the threshold, like it was already inside. I clutched the manual like a child clings to a teddy bear in the dark, desperate for comfort that paper couldn't possibly give. My arms wrapped around it as if the ink inside could somehow shield me from whatever else was breathing in that room with me. Then I heard it, the fridge, buzzing, low, mechanical, a sound so ordinary it shouldn't have chilled my blood. But in that moment, It was like hearing a coffin creak open by itself. My eyes snapped open. The red candle flickered wildly, the flame stuttering as if suffocating air that was too still, too heavy. Then came the silence. Not quiet, silence. The kind that doesn't just fill the room but consumes it. No wind, no bugs, no low hum from the machines that had kept me grounded in reality for the past few hours. Even the candle's flicker made no sound. Just an aching, crushing stillness. Rule number 6. My breath hitched. I bolted toward the fridge, legs trembling like they didn't belong to me. My fingers scrambled along the metal door until they found it. A small, weathered strip of paper taped just above the handle. The writing was faint, as though the ink had tried to escape the words it formed. Oh, watcher of dusk, I stand still in your silence. Pass me by. My lips moved before I could think. Oh, watcher of dusk. I began, my voice cracking like an old record. I stand still in your silence. Pass me by. It felt like trying to speak underwater. My tongue stumbled over the rhythm the first few times, the words sticking to my throat like glue. I repeated the phrase. Again and again, louder. And then I heard it. The silence shattered. A sudden gust slammed against the walls of the outpost, making the concrete groan in protest. Wind howled through unseen cracks. Insects returned in a chorus of buzzing, scratching life. The room breathed again. And God help me, I nearly cried. But the relief lasted all of 3 seconds. Then the phone rang. That shouldn't have been possible. I had unplugged it, pulled the cord straight out of the back. I stared at the empty socket, then at the receiver. It rang again, and again, 3 times total. Rule number 8 screamed through my skull. If the phone rings more than once per night, unplug it. I already had. I backed away, the manual still clutched in one hand, candle in the other. My eyes flicked the wall clock. 2:51 a.m. And just like that, another rule surfaced. Rule number 9. Never look at the reflection in the window after 2:44 a.m. I hadn't meant to. I swear I hadn't. But the moment I thought it, I looked, and that's when I saw it. Not in the window itself, but in the reflection. In the far corner of the room, behind me, a tall, human-shaped figure, perfectly still, head cocked slightly to one side, like it was trying to understand me. My breath caught in my throat like a wire pulled tight. I turned. Nothing there. I whipped back to the window, and it was still there, same spot, same tilt of the head, watching, unmoving. I lit another red candle, then another. My hands moved on instinct now, desperation drowning thought. The room bathed in flickering crimson light. Shadows danced madly along the walls. The figure remained, still, patient. Then I blinked, and it was gone, just gone. No sound, no movement, like it had never been there. But I knew it had. My instinct screamed, get out, get in the truck, drive until the sky changes. But the manual, it said nothing about leaving, not once. And suddenly that absence felt deliberate, like the rules had never been written for leaving, only for surviving until morning. And morning felt very, very far away. Then it hit me, rule number 11. Don't eat the food in the fridge after midnight. Simple, strange. I'd read it like a joke the first time, but now, it loomed in my mind like a warning carved into the walls of a tomb. Something churned in my gut. Hunger, maybe, or dread, wearing hunger's mask. I moved toward the fridge. Every part of me screamed don't, but my hand gripped the handle anyway. It was cold, damp with condensation. I opened it and found nothing. Not empty shelves, not expired leftovers. Nothing. Every item that had been there earlier, gone, erased, as if they'd never existed, except for one thing. A single, folded note resting where the milk used to be. I unfolded it slowly, heart pounding like a drumbeat in a funeral march. Don't look at the window again. That was it. No explanation. No name. Just that one line, like the fridge itself was whispering. My hand trembled as I slammed the door shut. Then knock, knock, knock. Again. Same rhythm. Same weight. The sound drilled into me, stripped away whatever calm I had left. My whole body tense, but this time, instinct didn't scream. This time, I didn't freeze. I glanced at the clock. 1:35 a.m. I blinked. Wait, that was past the time window. Rule number 1 ended at 1:34 a.m. Technically, I could open the door, and I did, cautiously, slowly, holding my breath like it might make a difference. I opened the door and saw nothing, just the empty desert, black sky overhead, wind rustling sand like whispers too quiet to understand. But then I looked down, and that's when my stomach dropped. A second manual lay on the ground, different cover, thicker, stamped in large, blood-red lettering. Rules for Eric, Night 2. Night 2. There wasn't supposed to be a Night 2. I wasn't coming back. No one was. That's when I realized the truth. This place, Station 119B, was a weather station. It never had been. It was a test, a ritual, a trap, and I was an employee. I was a subject, a sacrifice, a participant in something I didn't understand and could never escape. Maybe I hadn't broken rule number 1. Not technically, but I didn't care about technicalities anymore. I was done playing by their rules. I walked back inside, teeth clenched, and dropped the new manual into the candle flame. Just like rule number 12 said, if rule number 1 is broken, burn the manual immediately and pray. The paper caught instantly. The flame devoured it. Pages curled and blackened. The fire dancing like it had a mind of its own, like it was laughing. I backed away. That's when the room changed. Instantly. No warning. No flicker. Just gone. The cot gone. The fridge gone. The desk, the equipment, the satellite phone, all erased. The room had reset. Same size. Same shape. Same walls. But stripped bare. Just me, the window, and the candle. My breath came in shallow gulps. Then came the tapping. But this time, it wasn't on the glass. It was inside the walls. Light, skittering taps at first. Then heavier. Then moving. Circling me. Like something was crawling through the concrete, tracing a spiral I couldn't see. Trapping me in the center. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. And then, I remember screaming. I don't remember why. Exactly. Only that my voice tore from my throat, like it was trying to escape without me. I remember scratching at the door, fingernails splitting against steel. I remember the candle going out, and I remember the shadows. They crawled under my skin, not metaphorically. I could feel them, like black centipedes burrowing through my veins, eating their way into my thoughts. Then, nothing. I woke up at dawn, face down in the dirt, 50 yards from the station, my clothes damp with dew, my hands shaking, my car keys clenched tight in one fist. The manual gone. I stumbled back to the building. The door hung open. No lock, no chain. Inside, empty. No furniture, no gear, no candles. Only one thing remained. A mirror, taped to the center of the window. I walked up to it. I should have turned away. I should have remembered rule number 9. But I looked, and what looked back wasn't me. It wore my face, but not my eyes. The eyes were wide, too wide, stretched like the skin around them had been peeled back. They were black, bottomless, not hollow, but full of things I couldn't describe. Things that watched from the other side of glass. Things that waited. Things that remembered. Now, I don't take jobs anymore. I don't go outside after dark. I stay indoors. I keep the lights on. I pretend the rules still protect me. But nights are hard. Sometimes I hear knocking. Always 3 times. And if the wind ever dies completely, I stop breathing, just in case it's still out there, waiting for me to forget the rules, even just once. Story 4. Don't look at the pony. Let me take you back to early August 2005, maybe the first or second Friday of the month. My parents, my sister, and I had just started the first day of our yearly vacation. If you don't know of it, there's a small barrier island that hangs off the bottom of Maryland that is a vaguely popular getaway destination. It's small, with a population of not a lot, and can honestly be described as a kind of tourist trap of sorts. To us it was something special, in its own way. I suppose it still is now, even after everything. I still remember us pulling onto the island via the bridge that extends over the channel, hearing the cackling seagulls and the sight of boats bobbing in lazy waters, the heralds of our arrival to a week away from home. The sky was hazy that day with wide, gauze-like expanses of cloud cover. A constant breeze blew into the truck windows, as my parents argued lightly about why the island seemed so empty when we arrived that week. Dad had been saying that folks were probably afraid of the incoming storms or something, joking about those same people missing a great deal on rental homes. I found out later that the prices had plummeted substantially in the weeks leading up to our vacation, and there was a lot of availability. Looking back now, I can see the signs of missing cars and less than crowded ice cream parlors. There were still a good number of other people on the island, but there was a feeling of emptiness to the place. It made the laughter of the gulls seem all the louder, taking up the silence left by diminished traffic. We had picked up our house key and made our way to our home away from home. The usual course of action. It had some gaudy, tourist-trappy name that had been daubed on a signpost at the end of the crushed shell driveway. Of the details I do remember, that isn't one of them. All the houses on the island had cheesy names, something to help lure tourists like us in. But it was a beautiful house. For some reason, I imagine it always will be despite whatever happens around it. It was painted in soft yet dark green, or was it gray? Color, making the brilliant white of the trim and railings stick out like veneered teeth across the 2 stories of the house. Natural. Towering fences of hardy trees and ornamental grass separated everything but the backyards from the neighboring houses that stood a healthy distance to either side. It was a far cry from the crowded suburbia where we hailed from. Even then, the playful shouting and stomping of kids across a wooden deck next door could be heard as we stretched cramping legs. Like any other kids of our age, our assistance with unloading the truck lasted probably no more than 10 minutes. It didn't take much for my sister, Maddie, or I to start darting from room to room to check out our home away from home that week. The spacious rooms, clean and tidy from the housekeepers who had vacated just moments before we arrived, all had the same smell of sand and artificial lemon cleaner. We tore through them, inspecting every cabinet or loudly which room was going to be ours, shouting like junior conquistadors from the second-floor sun deck. 2 boys in the backyard next door, imaginary peasants to our equally imagined royalty, had craned their necks up at us from their connected backyard as we drank in our temporary world. And from there we saw the backyard, from between the white posts of the railing through glass double doors below us, past the back deck and down the path leading off of it, was a small pier jutting out past the marshy water's edge. We had never had one close to one of the previous rentals before. Our feet had dashed down the steps, excited pleas babbling to our parents to let us go look. They had let us go out with a tire of amusement on 2 conditions: that we would come back if it didn't look safe, and to not bring any swampy mud back inside. Most of it was directed to me, since I was older than Maddie by 4 years. We had agreed to those terms with all the eagerness of children who hadn't listened to a word of it and fled into the hazy sunlight beyond the doors. The air smelled of cut lawns, salt water, and low tide, all of it carried in a heady mix on the growing breeze. Tiny, choppy waves danced and ebbed into the seagrass that reached up past the edge of dry land. Fiddler crabs that scampered into their burrows, our pounding approach across the planks of the pier. It was old but sturdy, salt rime and algae growth marking the heights of the tide on the posts sunk into the earth. There's a certain magic to looking across a body of water to the land beyond, to feel another environment take hold of your senses. Maddie and I had giggled and laughed as we looked down, pointing out the shapes of larger crabs and tiny fish that moved in the murky green-brown waters. It was then that I saw it there from the edge of the pier, maybe 20 or so feet away in the deeper waters to the left. I had to blink against the light shimmering on the surface to make sure it wasn't just trash someone had dumped off of a boat. Hey, is that a horse under the water? The word sounds stupid now, but what else do you say when you see something like that? It was as if someone had dropped a carousel figure into the water. The general outline hard to mistake for much else. Maddie knew better though. She was a bit of a horse nerd back then. Her room at our home sporting a sizable shrine of books and toys. There were even a couple of shirts that I used to make fun of her for, some of them stowed away in her luggage back at the house. Maddie had stood close to me, getting up on her tiptoes to see before saying, "They don't have horses here, Mikey. They only have ponies." "Same difference," I had mumbled, watching the strange sight before us. It sat there, seemingly grazing on the bottom of the shallow ocean bed, the head low and its form stationary. We couldn't make much of it from our spot, the waves making it difficult to pick out details as they rolled and rippled. The ocean waters made the painted hide look green and sickly while strange. Short spots and streaks decorated its pelt at random. Maddie had raised her hand in a wave and called out in a sing-song voice, "Hi, pony." It didn't move, or if it did, we couldn't tell at all. I had laughed at her, forgetting that I also had been 9 years old once, and was about to tell her how dumb she sounded when someone spoke. "What you looking at?" We had jumped at the voice, seeing two boys approaching us across the planking. Our focus had been solely on the curiosity before us, and hadn't even heard them approach. One was definitely older than me, but the other clutched a green teddy bear under one arm as he walked in the shadow of his brother. He couldn't have been much older than Maddie. "There's a horse. Pony in the water," I had told him, my words excited at showing off our discovery. "Want to see?" "Is that some kind of game you're playing?" The older boy asked dismissively as he scratched at a cluster of acne on his face. My jaw tightened with teenage annoyance as he kept speaking. "Want to play tag or try and catch some crabs with us?" We found some scoops and shovels under the porch. "I want to see a horsey, Henry," the younger boy had asked meekly, tugging on his brother's shirt. I had smiled at him, and he raised his stuffed animal up to his chest, putting another ward between him and us. Maddie had her back to them, quietly focused on the pony. "It's not a game," I said, pointing out to where it was. "There's something out there." My olive branch and sharing the oddity in the water withered as Henry's eyes rolled, perfectly synced with a dramatic huff. Regardless, he walked to the end of the pier with all the confidence of a teen who knew when they were the oldest one present. "Come on, David," he grumbled, letting his brother shuffle behind him. I moved closer to Maddie, giving them space to occupy. It didn't take long for their eyes to widen in surprise. "Holy hell, you're not lying. Look at that stupid thing down there," Henry had said, craning forward to see it better. David bounced on his feet, a grin spreading across his face behind his stuffed animal's head. They began to wave and yell at the submerged equine, trying to get its attention. I had winced at both the sudden behavior and knowing how my parents felt about anyone swearing around my sister. These kids were not my kind of friends, and I felt regret at even humoring the idea of them joining us in those moments. But I felt something else as I heard something. It was a plaintive whining sound, as if an RC car was held aloft while its tires spun. I knew it by heart, and I spun in place. It was one that Maddie made when she was afraid of something. Her eyes were saucers staring out into water, lip quivering as she continued her sad siren sound. "Mikey," she started in a whisper, so low that I had to bend close to hear her words pouring out in a panic rush. "That's not a pony. Ponies need to breathe air. Why is it breathing water?" We'd been so distracted by the novelty of the idea that we never thought of the very basic requirements of nature. If Maddie's words had made the warm breeze feel arctic against my skin, then the sudden petush sound of something hitting the water made my blood freeze. Henry had found a stone. It probably was one lodged between the planks of the pier, or one he had found fascination with, and was simply carrying it around. I imagine it was one that any adolescent boy would have been happy to find, of good weight and shape, the kind that fits into the curve of your hand. And with the thoughtless idea of cruelty that only children are capable of, he had let it fly towards another creature with no remorse. The water rippled in fading ring mere feet away from the pony, the stone well lost to the depths by the time it moved. It didn't move like a pony should have. I still don't know what a pony moving underwater should look like, but it wasn't that. It was too smooth, a soft gliding motion as it propelled itself towards us. Shadowy murk shed itself in degrees, and a wake of water crested forward as it reached shallower and shallower ground. Foot by slow foot, the arch of a back began to break the surface. Someone gasped in surprise. Maybe it was Maddie or one of the other boys. I don't think I will ever remember, even if it was me. All I recall seeing that thing, and how everything was wrong. Bulging, bloated flanks of grease-colored white and rotted brown pushed straining ribs against the skin of the creature, the bones rippling the water's surface as it moved. Small spines, not barnacles, dotted the pelt in an irregular pattern, like fingers poking through cloth. Its legs were lost in the debris kicked up from the seabed. We should have run, but I don't know what would have happened if we had, or if we even could. I now believe we were paralyzed by some combination of awe and animal fear in those moments, and that if we had run, something else could have happened, something sudden and awful, lost in that moment. All we did was look on as it stared back. Maddie had once told me proudly that horses have some of the largest eyes on land, able to see almost in every direction. That is one of those pieces of useless information that has been lodged in the recesses of my brain, a piece of popcorn kernel stuck in a mental gum line. It gives me anything but comfort when I think now of those tumescent globes of sight, fat and ripe with unknowable things, that regarded us as they cleared the surface, raised up by its twisted, stumpy neck. They seem to feel everything in those moments. Those strange moments are like recalling something while in the throes of fever. I felt floaty, the world becoming a waxy smear in my mind. Breezy words, or perhaps concepts are a more accurate term for it, weaved through the wind and chuckling lapping of tiny waves as it felt like the pier could drift away from under my feet as those tumescent eyes seemed to feel everything. I could see that was Maddie drifting forward, a small foot lifting over the edge of the planks. But we all were moving too, heeding that call to something. I remember the water seeming like an eternity below us and something else. Someone quietly whispering, "Hey," in a long, drawn-out voice. Everything seemed so slow, and it wasn't until those eyes sunk like twin eclipses into the syrupy waves that the world caught back up to itself. The whispers became yells, the world becoming sharp and clear again in degrees. I grabbed Maddie, pulling her back as she tilted forward on the foot that was extended over the edge, barely keeping myself from toppling over either. Nobody was able to stop Henry from toppling over into the salt water. He erupted into shouts as he flailed and sputtered. David wailed at the top of his lungs, strangling the non-existent life from his teddy bear in a death grip. My dad sprinted across the yard, sunglasses bouncing off his head. He continued shouting, his words growing clearer by the moment in my ears. I don't think I know the last time I had seen him run, or in a panic before then. I don't think a lot of kids realize how bad things are until they see a parent run like that. He had charged down the walkway and splashed into the water, grabbing the floundering boy and guiding him back to firmer ground as his own shoes sank into muck. My heart had leapt into my throat when he had done that, fearing that he was so close to the thing that had been calling to us. But when I looked, there was no sign of the pony, just a scattering of sea foam and rippling water. With Henry back on firmer land, the two other boys had run back to their home at a tear. Their mother emerged shortly after, screeching like a banshee at my parents and us. It didn't take long to figure out that they blamed my sister and I for what happened, regardless of what we had collectively seen. Thanks to Mom's more level-headed approach, my parents eventually calmed everything down to an easy-to-overhear argument. A resolution was reached, probably taken to mutual agreement that neither family interact with each other anymore during our respective stays. Whatever it was, I've never been able to find out. I never saw any of them again after that. We received a good scolding of our own once everything was said and done. Dad said he saw us looking like we were about to step off the pier and into the water. As he regaled us with the dangers of the ocean, it occurred to me that I don't think he saw the pony in full or at all. Maybe it was a fearful focus of a parent witnessing children do something dangerous, or perhaps an unwillingness to admit to seeing something hard to reconcile, but he shut me down whenever I tried to tell him about what we had seen. Mom took his side, having seen nothing more than Dad run into the marshy waters. We weren't punished, just told that we would be missing out on pizza that day, and were given a warning about doing childish stunts like that ever again. Not that it mattered. Maddie and I both avoided the water for the rest of our stay. I still do now, all these years later. During all of this, Maddie hadn't said anything at all and took the scolding in silence. I am fairly certain that she didn't listen to any of it. She had instead stared off past my parents to the waterfront, never taken her eyes off of it. I think she knew that it wasn't going to be the last time we saw that thing, and I hate how right she was. Story 5. There's something in here with me. I don't know exactly what it is, but I am certain I am not alone. I don't know how it got in. I locked all my doors, and my windows are shut. I always check that before going to bed. So, logically, I should be the only one here. But I'm not. I'm certain I'm not. And it's not my dog. He's right beside me, asleep, like I was just a few minutes ago. But something woke me up. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling. Am I still asleep? Is this sleep paralysis? No, I can move. I sat up in my bed. I am wide awake and alert. But I don't know what has alerted me. All I know is that it's not nothing. There is something in here. Something. But I can't see it. The light switch is right there. I could flip it easily. But I'm frozen. My entire attention is consumed by what is in front of me. But all I see in front of me is darkness, emptiness, a void. I'm not usually scared of the dark. Well, not more than anyone else, I'd say. So is it the dark that I am afraid of now? No, there's something I in the dark, waiting. Do I see eyes? Eyes staring back at me? Do I see teeth patiently waiting for me to close my eyes again, to strike when I'm most vulnerable? Do I hear the breath of something sinister? Does it smell wrong in here? I am scanning all my senses for any kind of evidence to justify this feeling, and I'm coming back with nothing, so I should feel safe. But I don't. I want to call out to it. But what then? I have no weapon on me. I know I should have kept a knife or a gun or a bat or a flashlight or anything for nights like this. And maybe there have been nights like this where nothing has happened, and there was nothing in the dark except my own creations. But this time feels different. I don't think there's something there. I know there's something there. I'm trying to explain it to myself, but I keep coming up short. I know I'm not making sense. Half of me thinks I'm wrong, but the other half knows I'm right. And knowing is stronger than thinking. But what I guess it's nothing. It's got to be nothing. The doors are locked. The windows are sealed. My dog hasn't been alerted. And I'm just fucking crazy. Except my dog just woke up. He turned his head to where I've been looking for the past hour, and he's locked to it. His ears are up, and they are pointed away from me. He is still. I knew I wasn't crazy. He sees something. Something that I can't see. But he's not moving either. I wish he'd just bark or chase it, so that whatever is in this room with us would scurry out, and this would be over, and I could go back to sleep. But now I know that's something I S out there. I already knew it too, and he knows it now too. And whatever it is, it's something that has him frozen, too. Is he scared like me? What could scare him like this? What could scare me like this? Fuck, what do I do? If I reach for my phone, it could get to me before I even dial the first number. If I reach for the light, it could tear me to shreds with its teeth. If I make a move, it will certainly get to me, and I will be dead. But I have to do something. Fuck, I have to do something. I steel my resolve. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna turn on the lights. Fuck this game of cat and mouse. And fuck whatever is in the room with me. I can't take not knowing anymore. I can't take waiting. Nothing is worse than waiting. Anything is better than not moving. Going for the light is better than not breathing. The sounds I make leaning over to the switch are better than this sickening silence. The creak of the mattress is like an explosion, but it is better than the empty space between me and whatever my fate shall be. Waiting didn't help me, and thinking about it only made it worse. So what else is there besides action? I start the chain reaction. My fingers are the first to come to life. They hurt as they creak to life. I move my arm. It is the heaviest it has ever been. I breathe in. How long has it been since my last breath? My back stretches at an awkward angle toward the light switch. It is so much further away than I remember it being. Sweat beads on my forehead. I can taste the air. My dog's ears twitch to the sound of my body gliding against the sheets. His gaze is still locked forward. I can hear my own heart. Every beat takes forever. My fingertips touch cold plastic. I have arrived. My entire body hesitates. I pull the switch. I knew it. I fucking knew it. There's something in here with me. Story 6. Every time I die, I wake up as someone new. What happens when you die? Centuries have been spent arguing and convincing others the truth. I don't know if I have everyone's answer, but I have my truth. With every death before came life. My name is Emma. I'm 22 years old, and for the first time, I finally felt like life was starting to make sense. I just moved out of my parents' house into a small but cozy apartment with my boyfriend, Ryan. We lived each day one step closer to a life we hadn't even lived yet, but enjoyed the journey. I worked part-time at a coffee shop while finishing school to become a child psychologist. I could see the finish line, our wedding day, our first little house, and the German shepherd we promised each other once we had a yard. I could almost hear the bark echoing through the hallways of a life we hadn't built yet. Everything was clear, but I never saw the car that ran the red light. I remember the screeching of tires and smell of iron as my perfect little world went dark. The next thing I knew, I was in a hospital bed, the dull beep of the monitor confirming to me my heartbeat was still present. My body was wrong. Dead weight, limp, a sack of wet sand refusing to obey. I'm sure my eyes were open, but I could only see in splotches and light. The attempt to speak was futile. I moved my tongue around my mouth and noticed I had lost all my teeth. Toothless gums replaced my smile. I had worked so hard and withstood years of braces, only to have them ripped away from me. My hearing was dulled, almost like I was underwater. I could feel the presence of people around me. I heard the creak of a door open, and someone began to speak. Nous sommes à la fin d'un très long parcours. Was that French? I took 3 years in high school. I didn't understand all of it, but I heard fin, the end. I wasn't sure, but the tone said more than the words ever could. Why were they speaking French? I don't think anyone from my family spoke French. We were as Irish as potatoes and whiskey. I felt a pressure on my hand as a dip of water landed on my cheek. On S.E. Rivera, Papa, a hushed sniffled voice spoke in my ear. Papa? I tried to look past the blur, but I couldn't see anything in detail. I was basically blind. I just heard the faint weeping of several around me, as another pressure began on my other hand. I sat like that for what felt like an eternity, not able to move or speak or understand truly what was happening around me. I focused on my breathing. It was slow and labored. The beeping slowed. The world faded. I sat behind a desk as the rising sun crept through the high-rise windows. The dystopian cityscape outside was unlike anything I had seen. I grew up in small-town Vermont. I was used to small brick buildings and colonial-style houses. This was a metropolis, newer than New York, gleaming and sharp. On the desk sat a nameplate, written in a language I couldn't read. My eyes dropped to my body. A tailored business blouse. This wasn't me. This wasn't my body. My hands were pristine, coated in a red polish on the nails, breasts larger than my own. This wasn't me. My body felt fake, stiff as if even my smile had been manufactured. I pressed close to the window and realized I was hundreds of stories up. My reflection stared back, beautiful, meticulously mutilated into perfection. Panic surged through me. What was happening? Where was I? Who am I? My breathing boiled until it broke into hyperventilation. I threw myself at the glass. It didn't break, but knocked the air from my chest. I ran out of the office and down the hall. I had many people shouting at me, perhaps out of concern. I couldn't understand a word. I ran and saw an open door that led to a balcony. There were people out there talking and filling the air with smoke and conversation, which I could not be a part of. Some of them stopped and gave me a raised eyebrow. I could only let out a nervous laugh. Several people walked up to me, gently laying their hand on me, talking hushed and calm. I just wanted to wake up. This dream had gone on enough. I took a deep breath and put myself together. The people took a step back and let out a nervous laugh. Once they didn't seem as alert, I darted to the edge. I leapt, the ground so far away. The screams of those around me became a distant hum as the air around my freefall deafened me. It was time to try something. Maybe I could make this a lucid dream. I thought about flying, flapping my arms. In desperation to take flight, all efforts were futile. I sank through the sky like an anchor, all time to reflect on what was happening. Passed by in a flash as the earth welcomed me with its solid embrace. A sharp migraine pulsed through my skull. Machinery roared around me, men shouting over the chaos. Sunlight blazed down, so bright it felt like a slap after the darkness I just left. Slowly the world came into focus. The acrid mix of sweat and tar stung my nose. I raised a hand to cover my face and froze. Black-stained leather gloves. I tugged one off. A swollen, hairy hand stared back at me. My arm was thick, darkened by sun and ink. Muscles corded where pale skin once was. A bold tattoo stretched across the forearm. Olivia. Who was Olivia? Why was I hairy muscular? This has to be a dream. I thought, I'll wake up any second. Around me men worked the road, some smoking, some eating their lunches. It was too ordinary, too real. Desperate, I pinched myself. Pain flared. Panic set in. My chest heaved. My breath rasped. A man noticed and jogged over. "Hey, Danny, the hell's wrong with you?" "Danny?" My voice came out deeper. "Alien." "No, I'm Emma." "Where am I?" He frowned, then chuckled uneasily, peering into my eyes. "What the fuck? You having a heat stroke or something, buddy?" My heart was about to explode out of my chest. I had to wake up any means necessary. I spun my head and saw what could get the job done. A bit brutal, but it was the first thing I saw. A steamroller. I stepped away from the man and ran full speed ahead. It rolled slowly and I acted fast. Some men started to yell. I'm sure they didn't know what I was planning. I slid, trying to jam myself under the giant wheel. I managed to get my right arm and shoulder wedged. As the flattener crawled forward, I felt the evisceration of bone as it turned to dust. It felt like my body was being engulfed in the presence of the sun. I could hear the screams of men as the machine hissed. It slowly rolled an inch and pressed onto my skull, which caved quickly, cracking like a walnut shell. Dust and sand filled my eyes as the ricocheting of bullets whizzed past. The buildings around me were sheet metal. The streets around me were drenched in blood and bodies. I heard shouts to my left. My ears were ringing. I had a gun in my hands. Not my hands. I cried. I couldn't take this. I had the easiest way to end it right in my palms, but I couldn't. Too much was happening so fast. I heard shots very close. The door to the room I was sitting in was kicked open. I threw my hands up. I gasped as my hands were still in front of me. They were so small, pudgy little fingers. I was a child, toddler perhaps. The gunfire was gone. The only noise was the ambient sound of the ceiling fan. I laid my head back on a little lamb stuffed animal. I attempted to move my legs. I could, but they were weak. I don't think they could hold me up. I wasn't just a toddler. I was a baby. I might as well act the part. I bawled my eyes out, screaming at the top of my little lungs. Soon a woman walked into the room, plump, unkempt red hair. "Oh, my little one, come here." She spoke in a soothing British accent. She picked me up and started to rock me. It calmed me. I collected my thoughts. What was I supposed to do? The idea this was a dream started to fade. She hummed and rubbed my back. But I wasn't going to just go to sleep. I needed answers. I tried my best to talk. It didn't come naturally, like speaking through taffy. Even if I could talk, what would I say? I looked around my environment. Statues and paintings of Jesus and the Virgin Mary surrounded me. The room was charming. Stacks of envelopes covered kitchen table. Among the religious imagery was several photos of a man, thinning hair and a bushy mustache. Square thin framed glasses sat. There were a couple photos of the lady and him sat on a mantel, a wooden sign with the words "Forever in my heart," and the arms of the Lord carved and painted into it. "You see, Daddy?" She noticed my glare and stepped to the picture. I struggled to speak as my muscles were underdeveloped, like a stroke victim attempting communication. I knew what I wanted to say, but my mouth made me struggle. Would her precious child's first words be a plea for help? I could only stay here for so long. I can't wait to grow, my life's experience crammed into this fresh spawn. The moving of my mouth and tongue took surgical precision. The mother took notice, and awed in glee with the anticipation of the long-awaited voice of their child. Gargles and gasps left my little mouth in a struggled desperation to be heard. She gawked with glee, guiding my attempts of Mama or Papa. I could do this. Walking on undeveloped muscles would be nearly impossible, but talking, I could make this work. I pushed out the beginning, but the rolling of the L was a struggle. The poor mother began to speak with me. "Hello, hello." Her smile was almost ripping. She couldn't possibly smile any wider. I stopped my attempts and went quiet. She was still smiling, but it began to shrink. The warmth never left her eyes. "You got so much to say, don't ya?" She looked at me with only the love of a mother could give to a child. The mother carried me to a crib, a wonderful hand-carved wooden frame. A quaint small cross carved in the head of it and covered in a soft powder blue paint. I couldn't do much besides look up. She gave me a kiss on the crown of my head. The mother left me in the room, not before spinning a music box and leaving the sweet, crackling sound. Left in the isolation of my squishy, weak body, left to ponder what my world had become. Yesterday, I was in the midst of bliss. The blur of the accident was still present. I'm cognizant enough to remember, but the hospital, the skyscraper, road construction. Try and make sense of this hodgepodge of consciousness. Speech did not come naturally, but I had my goal. I spent the night fighting my vocals, but I was making progress. The night dragged like a fever dream. I wrestled with the mush in my throat and tongue, shaping noises, learning how to steer the muscles like oars through syrup-coaxing vowels to shape. Every grunt, every accidental syllable was progress. My mind was aflame with clarity, but my body was still a cage. When she came to me again, arms smelling faintly of lavender soap and stale coffee, her face beamed with expectation. She brushed a curl of red hair behind her ear and whispered in her soft, British lilt, "Come on then, my sweet boy. Let Mama hear you. Say a word for me." I tried. Air hissed and stuttered out of me, a wet gargle. But I pressed harder. "Ma." Her eyes shone. Yes, clever lad." I shook my head weakly, furious at the misinterpretation. Again I forced the sound out, this time dragging my vocal cords like knives across stone. Ma, no help." Her smile faltered. She blinked at me, uncomprehending, until the syllables stacked on top of each other, crude but clear. "I'm not you, baby." She froze. The joy drained from her face in an instant. Her arms stiffened around me, as though I had turned to ice in her grasp. I pressed on, desperate to make her understand. "I know, baby. Emma, Each word came jagged, broken, stitched together by sheer will. I could hear how wrong it sounded, like a drunkard's confession slurred through rotten teeth. But the truth was there, naked and damning. Her lips quivered. She backed away from me, clutching me to her chest, not out of love, but like someone holding a venomous serpent. No, that's not my boy. My boy can't. Her eyes darted to the mantel where her husband's photograph sat beneath the wooden sign. This is a trick, a wicked trick. I sobbed, coughing against the effort, but I forced the words again. Eye accident, car light, hospital fan, no dead. She shrieked, dropping me back into the crib. Her hands clutched her temples as though the words themselves were nails being driven into her skull. Stop it. Don't you say those things. Not in my house, not in front of the Lord. Her gaze snapped back to me, and for the first time, the love in her eyes was gone. In its place, raw terror, fever conviction. She saw not her child, but an intruder wearing his skin. You're not him. You're not my baby. You're the devil himself. crawling into the mouth of an innocent. I cried out again, begging through gasps, "No, devil me. Emma, please. Help me, please." Her body shook with sobs, her hands wringing at her nightgown until the seams nearly tore. Then something hardened in her, a grim resolve twisting her grief into madness. She staggered toward the crib, whispering his own prayer. "I won't let you have him. I won't let you take my sweet boy. Better the Lord have him than you." I screamed, voice breaking into a desperate litany of truth. No, baby. Car crash. Emma, no, devil, no. The pillow came down, blotting out my vision. The smell of stale linen filled my lungs as her weight pressed down. My tiny fists beat helplessly against the suffocating fabric. Every word I'd fought to claw from his body smothered back into silence. Above me, I heard her sobbing prayers, fractured and wild. "Forgive me, Lord. Forgive me. Take him home. Take him home." The music box still played on the dresser, its tinny, crackling notes winding down, note by note, until there was nothing left but darkness. I sat at a kitchen table, surrounded by people, a woman and 2 children, a young girl probably around 5, and a boy about 9. The little girl sat in braids. Her gapped smile widened as she took a large bite of her food. The boy wore a jersey. I think it's a Denver Broncos jersey. I must be in America then. "Todd, are you okay, dear? You look a bit pale." The woman said with a look of worry on her face. "You must have wanted pizza too." "Huh, Dad?" The boy spoke with a rowdiness only achievable by someone his age. "I love the macaroni," said the girl, smiling so bright. "Yeah, of course you do. That's all you ever eat," exclaimed the boy. Their bickering continued. I scooted my chair back. "I've got to go to the bathroom." I went to excuse myself. I don't know where the bathroom is. This was a different panic, not one of desperation to use it, but that if this is my house, I should know where it is. I tried to look as confident as I could, cautiously looking down the hallway to see if I could spot out if I had an open door. Unfortunately, I had to play the guessing game. I tried the first on the left. That must have been the boys. A bunch of sports memorabilia and posters of players hung on his walls. I closed and tried the next. Thank God, I locked myself in the room. I looked in the mirror in disbelief and disgust. I was a man, late 30s or early 40s. I had a small gut and stood about 6 foot. I had glasses and a short trimmed beard. My hair was covered by a cap. I stared at the logo on it. I have no clue what team that is. I sat on the toilet, trying to wrap my head around any of this. I checked my pockets and found a wallet and my phone. His name is Todd. He's 39 years old. He's from Colorado. So I know the bare minimum of information about him. Or me. I don't know the kids' names. I don't know the wife's. I pulled his phone out. No Face ID. I don't know the password. How do I fake any of this? I'm not Todd, father too. I'm Emma. How is any of this possible? What is happening? Am I dreaming? I remember I was driving. Did I got into an accident? That's I know. Maybe I'm in a coma, just a long sleep. As I gaze into the face of this middle-aged man, every movement uncanny is a reflection of this man, mirrored every single action. Of course it was mirrored. It was me after all. The adrenaline began to subside as I finally felt a form of calm. I took a long good look at myself, relatively in shape, balding on top. The crease of my eyes had lines beginning to form, a subtle engraving of smile marks on my cheeks. The misery that came with the realization brought me to tears. Was I any more than a puppeteer? The man I am has so many happy memories with a family that adores him, and I hijack it and take over. Left destitute in the prison of my own conscience, locked in the body of someone new. And what's left for Todd? Is he snuffed out of existence just like that? Or is he forced to rot in the recesses of his mind as I take his body for a joyride? I have no love for his wife or kids. Love isn't something you can fake, at least not to this level. I began to heave as the stress came back full force. "You all right, honey?" A sweetness laced her voice as to masked concern. Yeah, just an upset stomach. I'll be back in a moment." The dread of communication with his family was foreboding. They weren't monsters nor creatures of the night. but simply a family. One that loved, laughed, and cared for each other. Deep-rooted, grounded in a town I didn't know. Past experiences and core memories erased from this vessel. I wanted to be dreaming, but the realness, the detail and clarity in my surroundings made me come to terms with this being something else entirely. I couldn't hide forever. I would have to confront them and act as best I could. But how could I act like someone who I've never met, let alone heard of? Was he witty, quiet, loud and proud? I would have to see how it all played out. I cleaned myself up and took a deep breath and stepped back into the dining room. Pictures of Christmas past and presumed relatives lined the wall as the children sat with their plates almost empty, their laughter filling the room in a twist of jolly bursts and giggles. A goal I had wished to achieve, a happy, healthy family, enjoying time together. The pit in my stomach twisted with the ravenous gnaw of a stray dog. The room filled with joy, my heart shattered in the wake. I was a thief of happiness, a thief of life. My ears rang from the conversations around me like I had just landed on Normandy. I muted everything around me as I stared at the family portrait that hung over the doorway of the dining rooms. The face of the man was staring back at me. Todd! 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 The shrill screech cut through my haze. I darted my head to the source, the wife. Honey, where is your mind? Your son is trying to talk to you. Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost, Daddy. The little girl looked up at me with fear. I can assume I was pale. I felt the sweat running down my forehead. When not fixated on the photo, my eyes darted around like cornered prey. I'm okay, sweetie. I'm sorry, Daddy just isn't feeling good. I showed a soft smile to her. I wiped the sweat from my brow. Sorry, guys, I'm gonna go lay down. I just had to get away. I needed answers. I'm all groggy. Babe, what's my phone password? I just needed to get into my phone, and I could find something. What? It's our anniversary year, isn't it? She raised a brow at me, perhaps thinking I'd change it for some reason. I didn't say anything. I sat looking back and forth. We just had our 10-year? Todd, are you okay? Seriously, you're scaring me. She started to get visibly upset. The tension in the room was suffocating. The kids were hushed, looking at their parents, nearly as confused as I was. I fumbled for words and haphazardly abandoned my seat at the table. Heading back to the bathroom, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and typed in 2015, unlocked. I let out a sigh of relief. Who do I call? The decision was daunting. I could call Ryan, but what do I say? Hey, Ryan, it's Emma. I know I sound like I'm a grown man. That's because I am, but it's still me. Love you so much. Who was I kidding? That would be a nightmare. Maybe it would be the ultimate test of if personality prevails. I could try my parents. If I know what only I could know, maybe I could convince them. I tried what made sense in the moment. I called my cell phone. It didn't even ring, straight to voicemail. I heard my voice. Hey, this is Emma. Sorry I missed your call. I'll call back soon, bye. My voice, full of energy. I missed it. I hung up and held back tears the best I could. I should have slowed down, but everything, every death, the last breath of life, the first, as someone knew, was one continuous line of consciousness for me. I didn't have time to reflect. I took a deep breath in. I'll call my dad. My fingers rattled as I put his number in. With an exhale, I called. The rings crawled its way from the phone and echoed in my ear. Anxiety flooded through my bloodstream. I couldn't do this. A hollow voice came through the speaker. Hello, my father forced out. Tears welled in my eyes. Hey, Scott. I managed to squeak. Who is this? His voice was thin, confused. The rest of my life hinged on a few words, but they stuck like stone in my throat. If I couldn't say it, maybe I could ask instead. Emma? How's she doing? I already knew the answer. I killed myself a handful of times today, stumbling between lives, sitting now in the purgatory of suburbia. I just needed to hear it. Dead. My baby girl is dead. His voice broke and he wept. I wanted to comfort him. Tell him I was here. It's your ember. I cried. Your little light. What did you say? His sobs faltered. Realization crept in. It's me, Dad. I know it sounds crazy, but... You rotten son of a bitch. What kind of sick game is this? His grief twisted to venom. No, I hope one day you feel the loss I feel. And when you do, I'll call you up and laugh in your face. You fucking prick. The line went dead. The silence pressed heavier than his words. I had lost something, no. Everything. My family, my love, my future, my life. All I could do now was watch from the sidelines. The next couple days were spent as a chameleon. Good or bad, I couldn't really tell. The kids acted like they were talking to a stranger. I guess they were. The wife seemed suspicious as well, obviously, but luckily she didn't push too much. I had call into work. Seems as though Todd was a biomechanical engineer at a nearby hospital. I had to play sick, but not too sick to be sent to his place of employment. I spent those days reminiscing and digging. Marketing executive dies in apparent fall from Seoul high-rise. Seoul, South Korea. A senior business executive died Tuesday morning. The victim, a chief marketing officer, CMO, for a multinational corporation named Redacted, had reportedly been acting normally throughout the day before a sudden, unexplained outburst. Witnesses say she began sprinting erratically through the office space before running toward a balcony and leaping from an upper floor. Colleagues told investigators that she had shown no clear warning signs of distress prior to the episode. Police have stated that foul play is not suspected and are treating the case as an apparent suicide, though the sudden nature of her behavior has raised questions. In a brief statement, the company expressed condolences. We are deeply saddened by this tragic event. Our thoughts are with the family, friends, and colleagues during this difficult time. Worker dies in rural construction accident. Alberta, Canada. A construction worker was killed Tuesday afternoon in a tragic accident at a rural worksite, according to local authorities. Witnesses said the man had been working without issue before suddenly breaking from his task and moving into the path of a steamroller. Despite immediate emergency response, he was pronounced dead at the scene. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police confirmed the incident and stated that foul play is not suspected. Investigators are reviewing safety conditions at the site and interviewing co-workers to determine the circumstances leading up to the accident. Mother in Bakewell hospitalized after postpartum episode. Bakewell, England. Local authorities confirmed that a single mother in Bakewell was taken into care this week following a severe postpartum stress episode. Perpetrator states she became convinced her 9-month-old child was possessed. She had contacted authorities after taking the life of the infant. The woman was transported to a nearby hospital for evaluation and is receiving ongoing medical and psychiatric support. Health officials note that postpartum stress and related conditions remain a serious concern for new parents. Resources and support services are available for families across Derbyshire. There it all was my actions written into harsh new articles. The theories were wrong. It was me. I'm stuck, I don't know what to do. Todd had 39 years of memories, experienced his life, and I just came in and hijacked it. I don't know anything about his wife, anything about our kids. I can only fake it for so long until I don't know. But I can't kill him. It's ruining a family. It took me too long to realize that I killed somebody's child. I killed somebody who worked their whole life to get to the position that they're in, devastated, and their family. I killed a hard-working man, potentially had family, that wonder why he ended up doing what he did. And I took away the ability for a father to hear his family weep and tell them that it's okay for him to move on. I didn't ask for any of this. God knows I didn't want to do this either. I don't know why I'm in this situation that I'm in. I don't know what I can do to convince my family that I'm me without sounding like a crazy stalker. I could keep going, find someone similar enough to me, reach out to Ryan, and continue my life. How many lives and families would I ruin in the process? It's not worth it. Help me if anyone is in the same situation as me. Please help me. I'm stuck in the purgatory of middle-class family in a life I didn't design, with a family who loves me that I do not know. Am a monster for what I've done. What did I do to deserve, sir, this in the first place? I'd rather be dead and gone than this shell of a life. Please help me. Story 7. My dreams of the afterlife are only getting worse. Hey there, everyone. Quick rundown here. Wondering if anyone else has experienced something like this in the past, or if maybe I'm just going crazy. I work in hospital security and have had some strange stuff happen in the last few months. Though I'd start my account of what happened and see what others have seen, posting my journal entries and experiences. Hope to hear from y'all soon. Many nights are the same here, as I spent years assisting the hospital's emergency department. People came in and out, ranging from gruesome suicide attempts to the casual cold. I thought I'd seen it all. This was until about a month or so ago, when I encountered some strange things that changed my perspective on how the living and the dead operate. The ER was as busy as it could be, considering it was a late 4th of July night. Injuries aplenty from those who drank profusely and decided to test their limits with explosives. In my routine, I would assist the life flight crew with any serious trauma patients and escort the crew and doctors to the elevator to the operating room. This same event happened that night, and I prepared all my necessary steps to ensure a smooth transition between the helicopter and the OR. A man, 72, had fallen 3 stories while working on some shoddy scaffolding, and upon seeing his body off the flight, the details of his face, eyes, and hair were hard to discern from one another. Numb to the gruesome sight, I helped move the man to the OR. Unfortunately, he was also attempting to speak the entire time since his arrival, spewing blood in faces as he tried his hardest to finish whatever he was saying. To me, at least, I felt as though I was the only one who could understand him. Convergence. Weird to say the least, but it didn't really pass my mind what he meant until later on. As far as the rest of my day, it ultimately went on without any more events. I finished my shift and quickly found myself at home. I fell asleep soon after. I dreamt what I can only describe as something beyond my understanding. The old man's face was so clearly stamped on my brain that I felt as though I stared at him for hours before, although I knew it was just mere seconds. Convergence echoed through my thoughts as I found myself stuck in this nightmare. The flesh from his face horrified me the longer I was forced to look at it. The blood was pouring from what looked like a blossom of viscera. 2 eyes found their way into the center, like the stigma of a flower. Meanwhile, the shards of teeth and tufts of hair visible look as if they're trying to find a way out of that fleshy hell. After what seemed like hours, the dream ended with a scent of oranges. Something unexpected yet welcomed after the horror witnessed by my eyes. July 5th came. This time, an ambulance was called to dispatch. A woman, 19, a hiker who came across an unfortunate situation. Mountain lion attack. As soon as we loaded her onto the stretcher from the ambulance, we could see the extent of her injuries. Torn apart, blood was leaking out what ended up being most of her torso. Her body was mangled and ripped apart. Face also found itself unrecognizable. I couldn't help but feel uneasy. While assisting her to the OR, I was met with more words. They were almost clearer than the old man's, despite her condition being arguably worse. The cycle of convergence is near. The words caused me to stop and wonder what was happening to me. She was completely unconscious until that point. After her words, she convulsed and began to go into shock. This brought me to call my supervisor and fake being sick to go home a bit early. I needed rest after what I witnessed, which I didn't get. My home felt emptier than normal. Spaces felt tighter. So tight, I felt like a cave diver with my lungs pressed up against the rocks. Lack of real oxygen, making my brain feel fuzzy and disoriented. I wasn't someone who couldn't stomach the imagery or gore, especially after becoming desensitized to it after so long. I remember back when I started, I would find myself in the bathroom and vomit after seeing that, heart racing, and my mind ultimately finding itself a place right next to a panic attack. It was long enough ago, and now I'd become numb to the horrors of it. After entering my room, the whole place made me feel like I couldn't breathe, and my chest felt unable to expand with my breathing, making me fly into a panic, slamming my chest, attempting a strange ritual of CPR compressions, trying to revive myself as if I were already dead. 30 minutes late, my breath came back in a harsh explosion of force. My rib cage battered and bruised. I managed to end my panic and began to calm down. My night was long. except it had only been about 45 minutes since I'd gotten home at 7 p.m. I was exhausted. Soon, I fell asleep not too long after my self-repair. Again, a shocking dream came to me, one that felt all too familiar. I was on a gurney, strapped in and unable to speak. Blurry vision and pain unimaginable all over, tearing through me like a fire. My bones ached, and my skin felt loose and unfitting. I then realized as I cleared my vision slightly, I was the woman on the gurney from the night before. Doctors, security, and staff were pushing me to the or where I'd find a permanent stay. I tried to scream out in either pain or to see if I even could. I soon came to a stop. An hour seemed to pass in the agony of it all. Then I saw it. A light. The one they talk about at the end times. When your life meets an end. Except this wasn't the experience I expected. While I would pass, the bright light turned into a pathway quickly. My body restored as I made my way through it. Depictions of this place seemed horrifically inaccurate. I couldn't tell if it was heaven, hell, or something in between. The arches supposedly made of gold were something entirely different, made for what I could only describe as cobbled stone and eyes that never closed on their own. The floor wasn't clouds or something even remotely resembling any flooring I'd encountered, covered in what looked like sores and feathers, disgustingly soft and delicate. The finale was upon me. The gates of the arches tore themselves apart, allowing me entry, when all the eyes from the arches stared intently at me. Soon, a being made its way down from above. Its presence was something to behold. In a sky of reds and purples, a solid gold idol came down on feathered wings, spherical yet sharp, rotating with eyes surrounding each part of it. A being that looked physically impossible found its way to me. It spoke a few words. "You're not ready for convergence yet. You've still got much to learn." I was then thrown back into body on the operating table. I woke in my bed in a cold sweat. And so here I am writing this post a few months later. I've been keeping a dream journal to update everyone, once or if something else happens. Until then, feel free to ask any questions. I've done my best to write everything, but I'm aware that I also might have missed some things. Story 8. I am often visited by strange creatures. It's starting to get annoying. The cottage I live in sits in a small clearing surrounded by large, old trees. They're the kind that are so big your hands wouldn't touch if you were somehow able to duplicate yourself and hug it from opposite sides. I love them. They're my sentinels. Silent, rigid bodies reaching high into sky with a countless number of branching, thinning arms. Patient observers standing tall against anything thrown at them. Wind, thunder, torrential downpours. In the dusk, they send long black shadows running along the ground, and in the early morning, dappled light breaks through the gaps between their leaves. The cottage is a small one-story house. The only bathroom connects to my bedroom. The kitchen is spacious enough and has a walk-in pantry. And there's 2 rooms, one along the hall and one at the end of it. I use the one at the end of the hall as an office of sorts. The other holds a couch, a TV, though there isn't much signal out here, and a load of still-packed boxes from my initial move. It's been years at this point, and I've started using them as stands instead of unpacking them. Next to the kitchen is a screen door that leads out into an area that's been fenced off. The wire and poles are rusted, but they still stand, and so I haven't bothered to replace them. It was meant to be a garden, but when I bought this place, the area had been overgrown. More jungle than a place to grow fruits and vegetables. The first thing I planted after I weeded and cut and tilled the dirt were tomatoes, a row of them along the fence. Now I regret planting so many. Every year more tomatoes that I know what to do with ripen. I try not to let them fall off and rot. I've thought about selling them. Next I planted a few blueberry plants and under them strawberries. The strawberries never really took, but they do make flowers every year despite not bearing fruit. They're cute little things. Kinda looks like an egg in a frying pan. White petals ringing out a bright yellow center. The blueberries are plentiful as well. Though I love blueberries, and so the sometimes bloated harvests never go to waste. I make preserves and the blueberries into recipes. I look up online. I could eat them in any form forever. I planted a peach tree and a pecan tree, but neither are big enough to be productive. The peach tries to make peaches, but they always come out small and lumpy. I eat them, but there's never enough to really do anything with them. I've always wanted to live somewhere that's quiet. You could argue that the middle of nowhere is hardly quiet, and you'd be right. Crickets sing and cicadas cry. The air is constantly buzzing with the voices of living things. But it's the kind of loud that soothes me. It's peaceful. It's relaxing. Or it was. For a little while. There's a slight catch to all the comfort. Part of the universe's mechanics is that everything is trying to find equilibrium. Everything wants to even out into neutrality. All that peace and quiet is balanced out by a little bit of chaos that rears its head every so often. I noticed the energy that seemed to crackle in the air when the real estate agent took me on a tour of the surrounding land and then the house. I didn't think anything of it. That was my mistake. Despite this place's little quirk, I wouldn't choose to live anywhere else. I enjoy the solitude, the fresh air. I can sit on my porch in the morning and listen to birdsong. However, that does not mean that I am never annoyed at my circumstances. Case in point, last night and the events from this morning. A light show, a sign that a rift is opening up, flashed behind the dark pillars of trees. It changed from mint to hot pink to midnight, then egg yolk, then fuchsia, and finally to pulsing lilac. This happens often enough that I threw a pillow over my eyes and ignored it. I knew what was coming, what this all meant, but I couldn't be bothered. As I drifted back off to sleep, I heard the crackle of energy and high-pitched zing of the rift closing once more. I really wish I hadn't ignored the lights, because it was Shea who came stumbling through that portal. Shea, the big boss, the one that Oren and Dry report to, the one that no one could look at directly. She was used to getting her way, and she acted like it. I don't like surprises. It's my preference to greet whoever enters after the light show. That way I can get a look at them and prepare myself for their appearance. Oren is the easiest to look at. He's the most human-like, though I'm never not aware of the fact that he has 7 fingers on each hand and a mouth that stretches all the way up to his temples. If he were to open his mouth all the way, his face hinges upward like a shoe cover. The rest don't have appearances that are easy to accept. They look familiar, but wrong. I see them often enough that I can usually suppress the instinctual jolt that laying my eyes on them always brings around. There's something about Shea, though, that overrides my efforts. I flinch when her gaze flicks over to me, and I can't hold eye contact. She is the one thing that I would prefer to only ever have to see once, as the second best alternative to never at all. I couldn't be given even that much. I awoke to the sound of muffled movement, remembering the lights from the night before. I didn't bother to get dressed as I hauled myself out of bed and draped a blanket over my shoulders. Walking into the kitchen, Shea's form was hidden behind the open fridge door. I looked away when it smacked shut. I didn't think about how she got in. I stopped trying to ask her years ago. Shea had her ways. That was as much as I could get out of her. I didn't really understand them. I don't think I was ever meant to. After all, she's not of this world. She's not even of this universe. None of the travelers that come from the light are. You're out of milk. Shea said. Her voice was deep and resonant, lower than any baritone that I've ever heard. It was a kind of sound which rattled through you and settled in your ribs like a second heartbeat. The silence that followed was filled with the resonation of her voice. I knew her mouth didn't move as she spoke. Instead, it floated up from the slits lining her back like gills. Though that's not what they are. They twitch and pulse as she pushes air out of them to make sounds. Then I heard the sound of her licking something off of her fingers and claws. I cringed. Shea hummed thoughtfully. And butter, she added. I finally must have looked at her. Her skin was gray and dabbled with white and sky blue. A trail of long, coarse hair started from her head and traveled down her back, continuing along the ridge of a long, coiled tail. Her ears were just holes inside of her head, pulsing open and closed. What are you doing here? I asked, tightening the blanket around me as if it might be able to protect me if Shea got it in her head to attack me. Don't worry your little head. Shea hummed and leaned against the counter. She was smiling, or at the very least trying to make the best approximation of a smile. Her face wasn't really built for it. Her skin pinched and stretched as muscles went against their typical use. Instead, she just looked like she was snarling. I almost appreciated her effort to give me a human gesture. On her, though, it just seemed like a mockery. I won't be here long, just needed to stop at a checkpoint. Her blue tongue darted out a broad snout and licked residue out from under a claw. Is that what this place, my home, I thought as I gestured to the space we both stood in, is? I crossed my arms. It's generally not a great idea to piss off a creature that could thoroughly turn you into neat little cold-cut slices, but I trusted Shea's self-control enough to snark. Shea didn't like leaving a trail or a mess. Killing me would create both. The last thing she needed was the CCU catching a whiff of her scent. What would you call it? Her pale blue eyes rolled to meet mine. I looked away. The entire impulse had me turning my back to her. Not something you should usually do when faced with a predator. I trained my eyes to the window. Outside, the trees stood tall against a carpet of green grass. If I unfocused my eyes, her reflection would come into view. That way I could almost look at her. I wouldn't call a place I lived in for almost 2 years a checkpoint. I responded. I remember the day I came home and he was gone. The place had felt so empty the days following. And again I apologized. She wasn't sorry. I could hear it in her voice. I needed Cran to stay put. You know how tricky this can get. I never asked to be a part of this. I wanted to say it. Instead, I didn't say anything at all. Shea shifted from one foot to the other, then finally got out of my kitchen. I felt her air as she passed me. It was like the essence of a hurricane came with them. Dark, foreboding. It washed over me like cold water. Goosebumps prickled around my arms. Blood roared in my ears. My heart fluttered wildly in my chest, straining, afraid, slamming itself against the constraints of its cage. Then it stopped. She was past me. Shea paused at the front door, her fingers on the knob. A residue of oil smudged the shiny surface. One peculiar thing about Shea was that she always snuck her way in, but going out she always used the door. She spared me a look, then said, "You are also out of chicken," and promptly left. I sighed, because I knew I had bought some yesterday. Story 9. I live in the middle of nowhere, but an old woman keeps knocking on my door. I live in the middle of nowhere, West Virginia. My lonely farmhouse is surrounded by acres upon acres of sprawling cow pasture. It's been just me out here for going on 4 years now, unless you count the occasional stray cat coming to my door for the odd piece of bologna. I don't get visitors. I don't get solicitors. I don't get Jehovah's Witnesses breaking down my door or Mormons asking me if I'd like to try their magic underwear. Yes, I didn't get visitors until last Thursday when I was watching with a few channels that come on my old box TV. It takes a lot to unglue me from my recliner, but a knock at my kitchen door startled me so bad that I bolted up immediately. I crept through the archway that led into my kitchen. The sight of her through the door's thin glass window stopped me dead in my tracks. Through the sheer white curtain, I could see her staring straight at me. She rapped on the door again, rattling the glass. So much for hiding from company. I glanced up at the quietly ticking clock on the wood paneling. 10:17 p.m. I heaved a sigh as I trudged toward the door. My nose scrunched at the sickening smell of butterscotch and Bengali that wafted through cracks in the doorframe. The brass of the doorknob was oddly cool under my touch, like a warning, but I opened the door just an inch. The damp night air seeped into my kitchen, and so did her stench. This old woman had a bent-over frame, like she should have been shuffling around with a walker or a cane, but there was none. I grit my teeth, staring into her sagging lower eyelids that allowed me to see under her gummy eyeballs. I couldn't help but ask, "How are you here?" Her shaking hand smoothed over the mud that marred her floral dress. Under her decaying fingernails were dirt and splinters like she clawed her way up my driveway. She responded with a voice as sickeningly sweet as the butterscotch scent surrounding her. I walked. I glanced behind her and down my steep dirt road that stretched for miles. No, you didn't. Go back to wherever the hell you came from. I slammed the door in her face. It's not one of my proudest moments. I stared her down as I clicked the lock on my door and flicked off the kitchen lights. She didn't knock again. The rest of the night was normal. I sat in my recliner, watching Gunsmoke reruns, until I felt inclined to go to bed. I didn't let the thought of the old woman plague me for one whole day. My daily routine mostly consisted of drinking stout black coffee at my kitchen table, then migrating to my porch to watch the cows and snap peas. It's too simple a life for some, but if you inherit an old farmhouse and a fortune from your late grandparents, then you may criticize me. In the month of August, the sun here sets around 8:30. I glanced outside the window just above my sink, and the sky was a deep blue with just a hint of a yellow disappearing behind the mountains. I had occupied myself with baking bread that evening, a decent enough hobby, and it kept me fat and happy. I sprinkled flour on my rolling pin before working out the dough on the countertop. My eyes tended to wander with such a quiet hobby, and I'd always find myself glancing out that sink window. I loved to watch the calves nestle close to their mamas for the night, and that night was no exception. Even as I watched a particularly odd cow, short and stubby with movements more like an injured dog than a heifer, I stopped rolling out the dough and squinted my eyes. The other cows were terrified, letting out moos of horror as they hurried away from that one. All the cattle on this property were Angus, pure black, but this one had a head of stark white. Perhaps it had gotten loose from some neighboring property miles away. I thought this issue could wait until the morning, until I heard it moo. The moo was all wrong. Too high-pitched, too mucusy, too butterscotch. I grabbed a rifle I had propped next to the unused wood stove and stormed out onto my porch. This heifer was standing on 2 feet now, watching me, though it was a heifer of a different sort, an old woman. It was somewhat dark, but I could see her crepe paper skin and distant eyes. She was wearing a black gown now, dragging against the dewy grass below. Against my better judgment, I yelled at her in warning, "You'd better start hobbling the fuck out of here." She tilted her head at me, as though she was some poorly trained puppy. Then she was on her hands and knees again, launching herself towards me. She closed most of the distance between us before I could even blink. I should have shot her, but my heart sank to my stomach, and all I could think to do was run back inside. I latched my door and watched out the narrow window as she slowly stood again, just outside the threshold, placing a sweaty palm against the glass. Her rampant breath cast a heavy fog on the other side. It took me an hour to catch my own breath afterward. Even after this long, I still can't understand what happened. I taped a trash bag over the glass on the door that night. I checked the locks on my windows and my cellar door. I slept with my rifle propped up against the garish floral wallpaper in my bedroom. The wallpaper itself reminded me so much of that hag's dresses. All I could do was scrunch my eyes shut and pray for sleep to take me. The next morning, I admit, I was rattled, looking in the dusty mirror of my dresser. Heavy bags enveloped my under eyes. I scrubbed my hands over my face, hoping it would somehow wipe the delirium of a restless night from me. This old woman was animalistic. I couldn't help but think what would have happened if she caught me the night before. I prayed she'd gone away, but I would be prepared for her arrival tonight regardless. But I still had some responsibilities. I forced myself downstairs that morning, frying a few lackluster scrambled eggs for myself. I filled an old Stanley thermos with my strong coffee and opened a junk drawer to reach for my late grandfather's rusty Bowie knife. Then I cautiously opened the kitchen door and glanced out on my porch. No sign of the old woman. I wasn't even certain this old broad would be as terrifying in the daytime. I decided I needed to check on the cattle, hence my excursion outside. I walked up the side of the grassy hill, glancing at each cow as I went for anything out of the ordinary. They were all fine, grazing as usual and somewhat agitated by my presence. It wasn't until I reached the crest of the hill and looked down that I realized not all the cattle had been left unharmed. Keeled over on its side, a bull lay dead, Flies already starting to swarm and surround it. Wrapped around the bull's neck was a lacy black gown, pulled tight enough to kill. I shuddered, giving a brief glance all around me to make sure the hag wasn't watching. Then I stooped low, doing my best to lift up the dead cow's head. I turned a certain way and heard the telltale pop of a broken neck. I tried not to dwell on it, the absurdity of a little old lady breaking a bull's neck with her discarded dress. I also tried not to think about an old woman running around naked on my property. The rest of my evening was consumed with moving the bull to our bone pit with my tractor. I dropped the bull on the bones of the rest of the cattle for many years past and lugged over my bag of quicklime to sprinkle on its corpse. The smell of death around here carries for miles when left unchecked. I eventually settled down enough to sit in the rocking chair on my porch. The cicadas were unusually loud that day. I nursed a glass of sweet tea as though it were something stronger and gawked at the greens and yellows of the August trees. August was a slow death. Blink and the leaves would be gone. Fall would creep in, and that would be the natural order of things. The rest of my day was relatively normal, though I kept an extra watchful eye on my surroundings. Then it was time for me to turn in for the night once more. It was 11:49 p.m. The old woman had not dared knock yet, and part of me thought perhaps she'd given up. I felt the chill of the damp summer night settling around me as I lay in bed. I pulled at my grandmother's itchy Afghan blankets and stared at the water-damaged ceiling. I felt wrong that night. I knew why, but perhaps I didn't have the guts to admit it. My eyes were heavy, yet my mind refused to let me shut them. Without moving my head, my eyes darted around the walls, to the poorly done taxidermy mounts and deer horns, to my grandparents' wedding photos from back in the 60s, to where Grandma's dark velvet robe still hung on a nail in the corner of the room. There was an entire wall dedicated to crucifixes of all shape and size. This house didn't have anything for myself in it, save for a drawer full of clothing. In some way, the house still belonged to them, still smelled like Grandpa's aftershave, still had Grandma's energy and presence somewhere within it. Every time I walked into that kitchen, I half expected her to be leaning over the stove, stirring a skillet of gravy. I had just begun to drift off to sleep when a thunderous bang echoed outside. I jolted up, chucking my blankets off and slipping my chilled feet onto the floor. I snatched my rifle from where it leaned against the wall and slipped out into the hallway. I was incredibly cautious not to make much noise as I slinked down the wooden staircase. My left hand braced against the wood paneling as I went down, careful not to knock any family portraits off the wall. I took the final step down and felt the yellow shag carpet of my living room beneath my feet. I took a quick scan. The ceiling fan steadily hummed as I glanced around. My twin tan recliner sat empty, and the plaid couch against the far wall was the same. The ancient Magnavox television was off, just how I left it. The glass of milk I left on the dark oak coffee table was untouched. Nothing was out of place here, so I crept forward, raising my rifle slightly. I was creeping up on the archway in the left wall that led into the kitchen. I took a deep breath in, then whipped around the corner. I expected to see her face staring back at me, but the pane of glass on my door was still covered, and the room was empty, dark. I refused to be fooled by her. Just because she wasn't in my home, it didn't mean she wasn't nearby. I turned my head to the right, glancing out the window above the sink. I saw no cattle, only empty, rolling hills of grass. I laid my rifle up against a cupboard. Before peeling back the garbage bag taped over the door, I peered out into the night. My porch was as I left it that afternoon. I waited for probably 20 minutes, just listening. I was frozen to that spot in the kitchen until I deemed it safe to go back to bed. My breathing was unusually heavy that night. I remember feeling this weight on my chest, pushing down on my straining lungs. I forced my eyes shut and tried to relax just enough for sleep to take me. I calmed my breath to a steady, shallow rhythm. It was only then did I notice that I was not the only one breathing in here. My ears locked onto the dog-like, panting in the darkened corner of my room. My heart thudded in my throat, blood draining from my face. I debated not opening my eyes, just laying there and playing dead, but I couldn't. I cracked my eyes open, The corner was black. The breathing grew. Excited. Hungry. My eyes adjusted too slowly, but I could see a slash of yellow teeth through the blackness. I could see her gummy, clouded eyeballs, and they were looking straight at me. I clutched the blankets around me like I was holding on for dear life. I willed myself to look away from her, to snap my head over towards my rifle. It was supposed to be propped on the wall. Supposed to be. I left it downstairs. I didn't know what to do. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. It took me about a half an hour for my heavy tongue to form words. "Why? What the hell do you want from me?" She didn't answer me. She moved the whole night. Her breath did eventually slow to something more contented, like a purring cat. I heard the cuckoo clock chime for each hour throughout the night. 12, 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't sleep, just stared at her as she stared at me. It wasn't until 6 a.m. that the eerie smile was instantly wiped from her face. Her countenance turned blank, spaced out. Then she shuffled over to the door, and I heard her slowly walk down the stairs. The steps creaked and popped like her weary old bones. I am not ashamed to admit I cried after she left. I released a sob I'd been holding in all night. Part of me thought if I made too much noise, she'd launch herself at me. I was unsteady on my feet as I rose. I tore open the bottom dresser drawer and hastily threw on some clothes. I was about to set foot out into my hall when the wall of crucifixes caught my eye. I carefully removed one and clutched it to my chest as I walked downstairs. It did not deter her. She sat across from me at my kitchen table that morning. She was eating stale cereal I didn't even know I had. The woman couldn't seem to close her mouth quite right. I couldn't take my eyes away as milk seeped through the jagged gaps in her teeth and dribbled back into the bowl. Needless to say, I lost my appetite for breakfast as I watched her slurp the same disgorged milk back into her mouth for a half hour. She made herself at home, stoking up the wood stove until it was 1,000 degrees inside. Then, she took up residency in my grandfather's old recliner for the rest of the day. I tried to talk to her a few times, to urge and beg and plead her to go. She didn't listen. She didn't even respond. I was going to kill her today. I just had to work myself up to it. That evening after supper, she had occupied herself with looking through month-old newspapers. She would raise a shaking, withered hand to her mouth before slobbering all over it. She used her saliva to wet her fingers and turned to the next page. She occupied herself with the obituaries for a while before moving to the crossword puzzle. She was stuck on 6 down, an 8-letter word synonymous with forever. I knew the answer, but it got caught in my throat. Eventually, she used a blotchy ink pen to circle job advertisements. Positions for funeral home attendants, meat cutters, butcherers. Her blank eyes met mine when she slid the paper in front of me. Somehow, that was the final straw. I pushed back on the table, my chair scraping against the floorboards. I crossed the room for my rifle, right where I'd left it. I knew it was loaded. My hands found a stock, and I nestled it in the crook of my armpit. I grimaced as I clicked the safety off. There was no going back from this. I leveled the barrel at the back of her stark white head. My breath rattled in my lungs as I tightened my grip, then squeezed the trigger. The gunshot echoed in the confines of my kitchen, making my ears sing. It dazed me. I sat the rifle on the countertop, taking a few steps closer to inspect her. Bits of brain and fragments of skull pelted themselves against the table. She lay face down, arms splayed out in front of her. The hole in the back of her head oozed out a bloody sludge. I couldn't deal with more death today. Shaking and trying to pull myself together, I stumbled into the living room. I plopped down on the plaid couch, sinking down into it. I closed my eyes and heaved a sob. I would clean her up later, I thought, but that's not the worst part. The worst part was she was back an hour later, bent over my stove. She was gumming on a ladle of cream of mushroom soup, just enough for her. There was a vague whisper of a wound on her forehead. I watched it closely. It seemed to fade with each passing second. I'm afraid I haven't been entirely honest with anyone reading this up until this point. I am afraid of the old woman, not because she's found her way in my house, but because she is alive in the first place. I say this with complete conviction. I buried the sagging old bitch under my floorboards on August 1st. I remember. She hobbled up my driveway with purpose that very first time. I watched her from my porch. Maybe she had dementia or Alzheimer's. Maybe she was lost and her car broke down. I didn't think much of it until she sat down in the rocking chair on my porch, pretending like the place was hers. She didn't say too much to me for the entire 10 minutes I questioned and threatened her. Then, by way of greeting, she said, Irene and Harlan used to live here. My grandparents' names. I leaned against the peeling white post on my porch and gave her a quizzical look. Yeah, used to. What business is it of yours? She really looked at me for the first time then. There wasn't much life in her eyes, and that made my stomach drop. She pointed a wrinkled talon at me. You weren't very good to them. I scoffed. I took care of my grandparents for years when the rest of my family would have had them thrown in a nursing home. The old woman leaned back, fishing a piece of strawberry candy out of a dress pocket. How did they die? A droplet of sweat rolled off my brow, and I squinted my eyes at her odd question. Grandpa Harlan was so heartbroken about Grandma's cancer, his heart couldn't take it. The old woman hummed in consideration, popping the candy in her mouth. I cringed at the smacking sounds her ancient mouth made around it. Then she spoke again. I find it unusual that neither of them had a funeral. I cleared my throat awkwardly. It just wasn't in the cards financially, I said, doing my damnedest to feign ignorance. They were cremated, I clarified. She made an overt display of turning around, gawking at the farmhouse and the land surrounding it. You sure gained plenty from their passing. I grew tired of her catty statements. Listen, I'm exhausted, and I don't like company. I don't know how you made it up here or why, but you'd better be getting back. If you need to use a landline phone, that's fine, but otherwise leave. Her swinging jowls drooped impossibly lower at that. She grunted as she pushed herself out of the rocking chair, stumbling back onto her feet, now face to face with her. I tried to be casual as I stepped away from her and towards my kitchen door. Have a good day, she said, her face now as neutral as ever. I breathed a little easier for just a moment as I turned my doorknob. Then the words she said next stopped me in my tracks. I just don't think under that old oak tree is where I would have chosen to bury them. I whipped around to look at her, my heart sinking to my stomach. What did you just say? Her vile lips looked like two slimy earthworms as she said, Irene and Harlan deserve better than this, better than the likes of you. I could feel the blood rush to my face. You old fucking windbag. You don't know what you're talking about. Go home, now. She smiled at me then, wicked with too many teeth. This will be my home someday. I rather like it here. The way she looked at me made something under my skin buzz with rage and made my stomach weak with nausea. I vaguely remember feeling the cool steel of my grandfather's old Bowie knife strapped to my side, and that was it. I don't know what overtook me. I am not some murderer, but she was dead, and I was covered in her blood, and I buried her under my floorboards. I peeled up the disgusting yellow shag carpet in my living room, through the layers of plywood, then to the original wood. I kept going until I hit dirt, and I dug her a shallow grave with my bare hands. She didn't stink up the place. I covered her body with quicklime. Plenty go around on a farm. Nobody wants to smell the corpse of a bloated cow, in either sense. I didn't know what she meant when she said it was her home now. I don't know why something like this would happen to me. Perhaps it's divine justice or cruel and unusual punishment. That first time meeting her was the only time she spoke. She tormented me then, and now she torments me with utter, maddening silence. She torments me in many ways. It's always hot in here now. She keeps feeding the wood stove. It hadn't seen a flame since my grandfather tended to it. Now it never rests. It's so hot, but my body betrays me and won't allow me to sweat. So I must endure the feverish burn against my face and body at all times. She could go outside. Why was she allowed outside? I am stuck in this house. Some unseen force is trapping me between these four walls. I feel suffocated, like some invisible hands are pressing full force against my throat and lungs if I even attempt to step out onto my porch. It is unbearable, the suffocation. My vision turns black, and every primal urge inside my brain is fighting to keep me alive. So I give up. I come back inside. I watch James Arnett shoot another man on TV. The hag steals the remote. She turns the volume down just low enough to where I can't quite hear what they're saying. Eventually, my appetite disappeared. The food in my cabinets dwindled every time I ripped them open. The old woman was eating it all, but somehow, no matter how much time passed, there was always enough for her. But it didn't matter. The thought of eating made me sick after a while, until the concept of hunger became a numbness in the pit of my stomach. I was turning into a ghost, each of my functions as a human decaying and then fading away entirely. Yesterday I had enough. I forced myself to walk outside, to be suffocated. I never felt so scared, so helpless my entire life. Try and gasp for air, but nothing comes. There is no feeling like it. But I withstood it, in hopes of finally resting like my grandparents under the oak tree. By all means, I was dead. I remember this blackness, soupy and swirling around me, engulfing my sense of self. It was a comforting breeze across my stagnant river of a body. It filled my nostrils and my lungs and seeped into my veins. I remember thinking, nothing. I've always been an overthinker, yet my brain was just still. I was at peace, or so I thought. Then this morning, I woke up under the floorboards, coughing out lumps of warm August dirt and wriggling worms. I could hear the staticky TV mutter. I could hear the hag sucking on a piece of candy, and the wrapper crumpled to the floor. I tried taking a mouthful of the dirt, choking myself on it. I always woke up. Terror struck my heart each time, an overwhelming terror of life itself. I tore my way out of the floor, lifting up the loose carpet. I was panting, and dirt clung to me as I trudged toward my recliner. The old woman didn't look at me once, just smacked her tongue around the candy and stared blankly at the TV. As time crawled on, the old woman made herself more at home. One night, I forced myself to lie down in my bed for a dreamless sleep. Then I heard her flat feet patter up the steps and across the bedroom floor. The bed dipped and the mattress spring squealed. I bolted up, but her movements were not so frantic. She sat down slowly, calculatingly. Her back was to me at first. Then she mustered the strength to swing her swollen legs over the bed. Her shaking hand pushed me, so I fell flat on my back. I took a deep, wavering breath. She laid down next to me, curling into my body and draping her arm over my heaving chest. Her thin skin was so cold. I tried not to gag. Her arm was full of liver spots, and I swore they reeked of dead cow. Wiry, spindly gray hairs poked through each one of them. Her putrid breath was oppressive against my face, sticky in my lungs. I could hardly breathe. She laid there, staring at me. I thought she was incapable of sleep, until wet snores escaped her throat. She fell asleep with her eyes open. I extracted myself from the bed that night, and sat on the couch until I could calm down. If the old bitch wanted the bed, she could take it. I didn't need it anymore. I wasn't sure I even needed sleep anymore. At 6 a.m., I attempted to kill her again. I wrapped a dish towel around her throat. She wheezed, she writhed. I didn't let go until I heard her windpipe snap. It was a long morning. I hauled her body downstairs, tossing her corpse outside the threshold of the house and onto the porch. A naive part of me thought that would banish her for good. But a few hours later, I heard her ragged, pained breathing coming from my bedroom. When I found her, she was on her bony knees, throwing out all my belongings from my lone drawer. I let her. I hadn't been able to stop anything she'd done so far. She replaced my few items of clothing with her own floral dresses and some collectible salt and pepper shakers wrapped carefully in newspaper. Days faded into weeks, and I etched each calendar day away with a slash of dried Sharpie. Then came August 31st. I was glued to my kitchen chair that day, just staring at the calendar taped on the side of the refrigerator. I was shaking. I would have been biting my fingernails, but I discovered after a few weeks that they didn't grow back now. The hag occupied herself with something upstairs. I didn't even care enough to see what, even if it was outside of her regular routine. The occasional thud or bang would echo down the staircase, but it didn't move me from my spot. I sat there until it was dark, just listening to the refrigerator hum and the wood stove crackle. My vision tunneled, fixated on the calendar only to occasionally dart the clock. 11:59 p.m. It was almost midnight, and it was almost September. My jaw clamped down tight, grinding my teeth together. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. I'd never prayed before my grandparents died. Only after I prayed not to get caught. Now I pray for the hag to release me. My mouth went bone dry as I listened to the clock tick the final seconds of August. My leg bounced frantically. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I thought I'd been successful in leaving August behind. Then all the lights in the house went dark. I was sitting in the pitch black, the warm wood of the kitchen chair underneath me. My refrigerator went quiet. The TV snapped off. Hot air puffed against my face like a foul breath. I didn't move. I kept my eyes where I thought the calendar was. I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew it, and it didn't make it any less devastating. After an agonizing minute, I heard power hum back through the wiring in the house. A lone light bulb stuttered on overhead. My jaw quivered as I looked at the calendar. My sharper markings were gone. It was blank. August 1st. It was August 1st. When I could beckon myself to move, I pointed my rifle at the roof of my mouth and pulled the trigger. The momentary darkness that washed over me like tides on a beach supplied me little comfort this time. I woke up, my tongue laved over a mushy pit where the roof of my mouth should have been. My hair and scalp shifted on their own volition as the top of my skull weaved itself back together. Second by second, I felt no pain. God saved me, I felt no pain. The month of August was eternity, and I was stuck in it. I've come to terms with the fact that I'm not afraid of the old woman. I am afraid of said eternity, and I'm stuck with both in a house that smells like mothballs and butterscotch, with a TV that only plays old westerns, and with crochet blankets that smell like death. I am prohibited from truly living my life. Yet I cannot die. This is my eternity. So I urge you, please take great care and great caution. Never open up when an old woman knocks on your door. Story 10. My friend changed after coming back from a trip to Europe. You grow up hearing stories about vampires. They bite your neck and suck your blood, and oftentimes they turn you into just like them. Well, it's not as simple as fiction claims. As I write this, I'm dangerously close to finishing my transformation, and as much as I wanted to stop, I can't. So here I am, writing this while the shreds of my humanity still remain. So none of you have to go through this yourself. It all started with my good friend Alfie. We met in college and became close pretty quickly. Fast forward 6 years later, we were still close and we saw each other very often. I will admit, I had a crush on him for a while, but I had never done anything because I was pretty sure I wasn't his type. Actually, if I were to be honest, I didn't have very good self-esteem and I felt like I wasn't pretty enough for him or anyone else for that matter. Back in June, Alfie went on a business trip to Europe. I didn't remember which country, but I thought it was farther east. He was gone for 2 weeks, and then I went to the airport to give him a ride back to his apartment. Right then, I knew something was different. He looked paler, and he lost some weight, not that he needed to in the first place. Unlike me, there was also something about the way he looked at me when he got in the passenger seat. It was still warm and friendly, but there was something else there that made me feel a little vulnerable, exposed, naked. But I decided it was nothing as we started talking on the way to his apartment. Once we got to his place, I helped him carry his luggage up to his unit. I then hugged him and was about to say goodbye so he could unpack and relax. Instead, he asked me to stay and watch a movie if I wasn't too busy. I was a little surprised, so I asked if he was sure he didn't want to rest. He said he missed me and wanted to spend time together. Then I noticed that whatever was in his expression again, and I found myself saying yes. We ended up watching a horror movie with vampires. I'm a pretty anxious person, but I do like horror. I just get really jumpy, and I often shriek at jump scares. Alfie knew this, and he usually made fun of me whenever that happened. Not tonight. The first jump scare had me fall over against him, and he grabbed hold of me. "You good, Bethy?" Yeah, I breathed, feeling embarrassed. He was still holding me against him, almost hugging me. I didn't want him to let go, but I knew staying like this would have been ridiculous. I moved to get off him, but his grip tightened, keeping me in place. I looked up at him, confused, but he just smiled. I don't mind if you don't. And not at all, I stammered, his icy blue eyes boring into mine. And I couldn't bring myself to look away. He had that look in his expression again, and it was making me antsy, but not exactly in a bad way. Then I realized that he was moving closer to my face, and before I knew it, his lips were on mine. Alfie was kissing me, and it was honestly the best kiss I had ever had. The next thing I knew, he was carrying me off to his bedroom, and my status as a virgin was no longer. I woke up the next day feeling really warm. Alfie was cuddling me, both of us still naked. He had already woken up, but was contentedly lying next to me. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty." I yawned. "Good morning. Was last night good for you?" He tightened his grip around my waist. "The best." I hummed slightly as he started pressing kisses along my neck. I turned around so he could kiss me on the mouth, and we ended up having sex again. After that, I got up and got dressed so I could get ready for work. Right before I left, I turned to look at him. "What are we?" He smiled, still lying naked on the bed. "Anything you want us to be, love." I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. I went back to the bed to give him one last kiss. I almost regretted it because we started making out and he pulled me on top of him, as if we were going for another round. But I had to leave for work, so I managed to pull myself away. "Later, okay? Tonight?" "Absolutely." I gave him one last peck and left, feeling lighter than ever. In fact, I felt so light I could have sworn my clothes felt looser. They must have been stretched out when he was pulling them off me. He had been rather rough about it. I ended up going back to Alfie's that night, and we had sex again. The next morning, Alfie made me breakfast, and I was able to leave with a brief kiss and a full stomach. Our relationship continued, and I honestly was on cloud nine. I had never been so happy with someone in my life. My best friend Dinah was getting worried, though. One day, we met up for lunch a month into my relationship with Alfie, and she said I looked sickly pale and that I lost a ton of weight in such a short amount of time. She wasn't wrong. I ended up having to switch to a lighter shade of foundation, and my clothes were all sliding off my body. I went shopping for new clothes and found that I had gone down from size 14 to size 8 in a matter of 1 month. I went to my doctor, and everything seemed fine. I reported eating slightly less than I used to, but it wasn't enough to explain the huge weight loss. My doctor ordered some labs and scans, in case something was wrong, but everything seemed to check out. No STDs, no cancer, no unusual blood levels, nothing. My pulse seemed to be slightly lower than average, but the nurse said that it was still fine for now. It was kind of scary not knowing what happened, but I was also relieved that I was skinnier. A couple weeks later, my lease was about to end, and Alfie suggested I move in with him, since I spent most nights at his place. It made sense financially, so I packed up my things at my old apartment, and he helped me bring them over to his place. I hadn't even started unpacking before he picked me up and took me into our bedroom. It almost felt like we were married. I told Dinah, who also knows Alfie, and she was completely weirded out. "This is so out of character for both of you. Are you okay?" Never been happier. As time went on, the sex increased in frequency since we were actually living together. I was still losing weight. The clothes I bought were getting too big, and the number on the scale continued going down. My skin was still getting paler, causing me to change foundation shades again. Everyone in my life was worried, except for Alfie. Not once had he commented on my weight, but I honestly appreciated him so much for that. I know anyone reading this is concerned about my physical health by this point. Trust me, this is just the tip of the iceberg, though. Let me tell you what happened last week. We were making out when, right in the middle of necking, he bit my neck hard. It actually hurt, and I pushed him off. To my horror, blood was dripping from his now pointed teeth. I felt my neck, and it was wet with blood. I stared at him, too horrified to speak. What was happening? Sorry, Bethy love, he said, slowly crawling back on top of me. I was too shocked to push him off again. But it's finally time. In 1 week, the process will finally be done. Well, what process? I stammered. Why? To be like me, he whispered against my ear. His tongue flicked out to lick it. Bloodthirsty, lusty, young, healthy for all eternity. Just like the creatures in that movie we watched when I took your innocence. What? I managed to get out. Vampires? Was he actually serious? But the more I looked at his fangs, a heavy feeling of dread came over me. Holy shit. Vampires were real, and my boyfriend was one of them. Haven't you noticed anything different about me, Bethy love? He murmured, his lips ghosting along my jaw and traveling back down to my neck. He started licking up blood. The pallor, the weight, the sex drive. Oh, but don't worry. I've always been attracted to you. It just took 2 weeks of being seduced by a lovely woman in Romania to give me the courage. Romania. That was where his business trip had taken him. As seduced. Seduce, love. Don't believe what pop culture tells you. Vampires can't just change you with one bite in one night. They can't? Of course not, love. There would be far more vampires in that case. No. He finished with my neck blood and kissed a wound. It depends on the human, but vampires need to spend a certain amount of time having relations with them. You see, vampirism is like an STD. You get it through sex and blood. You have sex with a human enough times until they're primed enough for the last stage of transformation. Then you do what they always say vampires do and bite them. You get to feed on their blood and, in the process, insert your venom into the bloodstream. The transformation continues for 1 more week at a much more accelerated pace. You'll start craving blood. You'll get the ability to sharpen your teeth on command. And then your presence will become an aphrodisiac to humans who get too close to you, except for the ones with incompatible sexual orientations. I myself could not attract a lesbian or a straight man even if I wanted to. Not that I wanted to. It was only you I wanted to take. For now, at least. Why me? I whimpered. I wanted to push him off, but I was somehow still craving his touch, the feeling of him on top of me. Maybe, if he continued to fuck me, I could forget all of this was happening. Oh, Bethy love, he caressed my cheek, almost lovingly. I told you I was attracted to you before the transformation, right? After the transformation occurred, my sire told me that since she already had her lifelong mate, I needed to sire my own. Vampires have this amazing keen sense of whom they're meant to be with, and I knew right and there that you were the one. What if I could stop the transformation from finishing? No can do, Bethy love. The venom's in your system now. Now, time awaits, and then you'll be young and healthy forever. Bonus, the sex will be much, much better. In the meantime, I was still horrified by everything I learned, but his vampire aura must have been an aphrodisiac, as he said, because I couldn't help still wanting him. I let him fuck me over and over again until the sun came up. I missed a day of work, having to call in sick because I was so terrified of what was to come. It's now the night before the transformation is complete. I can't stand human food anymore, and Alfie apparently has a secret blood bank stock that I can feed from. I can sharpen my teeth. I attract more attention on the streets than ever before, which strangely doesn't bother me as much as I thought it would. It's as if I know I have power over the creeps who catcall me or approach me for my number. I'm scared of this power, but I know I have no choice in taking it. I can only write this down while I'm still sane and before Alfie comes home. Please note that if any of you comment after 24 hours, I will not be able to respond as I will be full-on vampire by then. This account will be locked so Vampire Me can't delete this or terrorize y'all in the comment section. Whatever you do, readers, if anyone in your life has these vampiric symptoms, do not fuck around.